At Oak Ridge Lane stood an elegant two-story home to the Corin family. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect family. Successful, attractive, and happy. Dwayne Corin was known for his warm smile and impeccable taste in wine. His wife, Sandra, was a part-time yoga instructor, whose kind nature and community involvement made her a beloved figure in the neighborhood. Their children, 8-year-old Lila and 5-year-old Theo, were bright and well-mannered, often praised by teachers and other parents alike. As summer approached, the Corin family was preparing for what they hoped would be their best year yet. Dwayne had recently secured a promotion at work. Sandra was expanding her yoga classes, and the children were excelling in school and their extracurricular activities. Little did they know that their world was about to be shattered by an unthinkable tragedy. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon in late May when Zara Jackman first stepped onto the porch of the house. At 23, Zara was a vision of youthful energy and enthusiasm. Her long auburn hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her emerald eyes sparkled with an eagerness to please. She smoothed down her crisp white blouse and took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. Sandra Corin answered the door, her face lighting up with a welcoming smile. She ushered Zara inside, calling out to Dwayne and the children. As the family gathered in the living room, Zara's gaze was immediately drawn to Dwayne. His strong jawline and kind eyes made her heart skip a beat, though she quickly composed herself. Zara's background seemed impeccable. A recent graduate from the local university with a degree in child psychology, she came highly recommended by the agency. Her references spoke glowingly of her responsibility, creativity, and genuine love for children. As she interacted with Lila and Theo, it was clear that she had a natural rapport with kids. The children were instantly drawn to her warm personality and the exciting activities she proposed. Dwayne and Sandra exchanged approving glances as they watched Zara engage with their children. They were impressed by her educational background and the thoughtful questions she asked about their family routine and the children's individual needs. Zara explained her philosophy on childcare, emphasizing the importance of structure balanced with fun and learning opportunities. As the interview progressed, Zara's attention subtly shifted between the family members. While she maintained her focus on the children, her eyes would occasionally flicker to Dwayne, lingering just a moment too long. If Sandra noticed, she gave no indication, her own focus primarily on how well Zara was connecting with Lila and Theo. By the end of the meeting, the decision was unanimous. Zara would start the following week, watching the children after school and during the summer break. As she left the house, Zara felt a surge of excitement, not just for the job but for the opportunity to become part of the Corin family's world. What the Corin family couldn't have known was that behind Zara's polished exterior and impressive credentials lay a complex web of half-truths and carefully crafted personas. The young woman they had just welcomed into their home would become the catalyst for a series of events that would tear their perfect world apart. From the outside, the Corin family seemed to have it all. Dwayne's career was on an upward trajectory, his recent promotion cementing his status as a rising star in the competitive world of investment banking. His colleagues admired his sharp mind and easygoing nature, while clients were drawn to his confident demeanor and track record of success. Sandra, with her lithe yoga instructor's body and serene demeanor, was the picture of health and balance. Her yoga studio had become a sanctuary for many in the community seeking peace and wellness. She juggled her growing business with volunteer work at the local women's shelter, earning her a reputation as both a skilled instructor and a compassionate member of the community. Lila, their precocious 8-year-old, was a budding artist whose paintings already adorned the walls of her elementary school. With her father's charm and her mother's grace, she was well liked by her peers and adored by her teachers. Theo, at 5, was a bundle of energy with an infectious laugh. His kindergarten teachers praised his curiosity and kindness, noting how he always included other children in his games. However, beneath the polished veneer of their lives, cracks were beginning to show. Dwayne's demanding job often kept him at the office late into the night, his absence at family dinners becoming more frequent than his presence. The stress of his high-pressure career manifested in mood swings that he struggled to control, sometimes snapping at Sandra over minor issues. Sandra, while outwardly calm, harbored a growing resentment towards Dwayne's absence and emotional distance. She threw herself into her yoga practice and volunteer work, finding fulfillment outside the home that was increasingly lacking within it. The passion that had once defined their relationship had cooled, replaced by a cordial but often tense coexistence. Despite these struggles, the Corin family worked hard to maintain their image of perfection. They attended neighborhood barbecues with matching smiles, posted carefully curated family photos on social media, and spoke only in glowing terms about each other to friends and acquaintances. It was into this complex family dynamic that Zara Jackman stepped, her keen eyes quickly picking up on the undercurrents of tension and dissatisfaction. Where others saw a flawless facade, Zara perceived vulnerability, a family teetering on the edge of discord, ripe for manipulation. As Zara integrated herself into the Corin household, she began to form her own narrative of the family dynamics. In her mind, Dwayne was an unappreciated husband and father, trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who didn't understand him. The children, she believed, needed a stronger maternal figure, someone who could provide the stability and attention they craved. Little did the Corin family know that the very person they had hired to help maintain their carefully constructed world would be the one to shatter it completely. As the weeks passed, Zara became an indispensable part of the Corin household. Her dedication to the children was evident in the creative activities she planned, the patience she showed in helping with homework, and the genuine affection she seemed to have for Lila and Theo. Sandra found herself increasingly relying on Zara, grateful for the extra help as she focused on expanding her yoga business. But beneath Zara's helpful exterior, a dangerous obsession was taking root. Her initial attraction to Dwayne had blossomed into a full-fledged infatuation, fueled by their daily interactions and the glimpses she caught of his life. She began to catalog every detail about him: the way he liked his coffee in the morning, the cologne he wore, the sound of his laughter when he played with the children. Zara's fixation manifested in subtle ways at first. She would linger in Dwayne's home office, running her fingers over his books and inhaling the scent of his jacket, left draped over a chair. When doing laundry, she would hold his shirts close, imagining what it would be like to be held by him. She volunteered to stay late, hoping to catch a moment alone with Dwayne when he returned from work. As her obsession grew, so did her resentment towards Sandra. In Zara's distorted view, Sandra was neglectful of her family, too focused on her own pursuits to appreciate the wonderful man she had married. Zara convinced herself that she could be a better wife to Dwayne, a better mother to the children. She began to insert herself more forcefully into family matters, offering unsolicited advice on everything from Dwayne's diet to the children's education. Dwayne, flattered by the attention and grateful for the help with the kids, failed to see the warning signs. He found himself looking forward to his interactions with Zara, drawn to her youthful energy and the way she seemed to hang on his every word. In Zara, he found the admiration and understanding he felt was lacking in his marriage. Sandra, however, began to sense that something was amiss. She noticed how Zara's eyes followed Dwayne around the room, the way the young woman's hand would linger a bit too long when passing him something. She saw how Zara tried to mimic her own style, buying similar clothes and even adopting some of her mannerisms. One evening, Sandra returned home early from a yoga class to find Zara wearing one of her dresses, standing in front of the mirror in the master bedroom. The young woman had been so engrossed in her fantasy that she hadn't heard Sandra enter. For a moment, they stared at each other in shocked silence before Zara stammered out an apology, claiming she had spilled something on her own clothes and needed to borrow something quickly. The incident left Sandra deeply unsettled. She tried to discuss her concerns with Dwayne, but he dismissed them as mere jealousy or overreaction. This dismissal drove a further wedge between them, exactly as Zara had hoped. As summer progressed, Zara's behavior became increasingly erratic. She began to accidentally run into Dwayne around town, showing up at his favorite coffee shop or the gym he frequented. She created problems in the house that required Dwayne's attention, manufacturing reasons for them to be alone together. In her private moments, Zara's fantasies took a dark turn. She imagined a life where Sandra no longer existed, where she could step seamlessly into the role of Dwayne's wife and the children's mother. The line between fantasy and reality began to blur in Zara's mind, her obsession consuming every aspect of her life. What had started as a harmless crush had morphed into a dangerous fixation. Zara was now willing to go to any lengths to make her twisted dreams a reality, setting the stage for a tragedy that would soon rock the quiet community to its core. The pivotal moment that pushed Zara over the edge came on a sweltering August evening. The Corin family had planned a weekend getaway to celebrate Dwayne and Sandra's upcoming 10th wedding anniversary. Zara, who had been initially asked to house sit, manipulated the situation so that her presence was required for the trip to help with the children. As they settled into the luxurious lake house, the tension between Dwayne and Sandra was palpable. An argument that had been brewing for weeks finally erupted, their heated words carrying across the still water. Zara, who had taken the children for a walk to give the couple privacy, returned to find Sandra in tears and Dwayne storming off to cool down. In that moment, Zara saw her opportunity. She comforted the children, tucking them into bed with soothing words and promises of a better tomorrow. Then, she sought out Dwayne, finding him nursing a whiskey on the dock. Under the moonlight, Zara played the role of the sympathetic listener, allowing Dwayne to vent his frustrations about his marriage. As the night wore on and the whiskey flowed, Dwayne's inhibitions lowered. In a moment of weakness, he confided in Zara about his doubts, his fears, and his loneliness. Zara, seizing the moment, leaned in and kissed him. For a brief second, Dwayne responded before abruptly pulling away, horrified at what had transpired. Dwayne's rejection and subsequent apology to Sandra the next day shattered Zara's illusions. She realized that despite the problems in their marriage, Dwayne was committed to Sandra and their family. This realization, instead of deterring Zara, only fueled her determination. In her twisted logic, she concluded that the only thing standing between her and the life she desired was Sandra. On the drive back to Oak Ridge Lane, as Zara watched Dwayne and Sandra hold hands in reconciliation, a chilling resolve settled over her. She began to formulate a plan, one that would remove Sandra from the picture permanently. No longer content to wait and hope, Zara decided to take matters into her own hands. The carefree weekend that was meant to rejuvenate the Corin family had instead set in motion a series of events that would lead to an unthinkable crime. Zara's obsession had crossed a line from which there was no return, and the quiet community was about to be rocked by a tragedy no one could have foreseen. In the weeks following the fateful weekend at the lake house, Zara's plan began to take shape with frightening precision. Her outward demeanor remained unchanged. She was still the perfect babysitter, doting on the children and maintaining a respectful distance from Dwayne. But behind her placid smile, a storm was brewing. Zara's first step was to gather information. She methodically went through the Corin home when no one was around, photographing documents, noting schedules, and searching for anything she could use. She paid particular attention to Sandra's routine, tracking her comings and goings with obsessive detail. Next, Zara began to subtly manipulate the family dynamics. She would accidentally mention seeing Sandra talking closely with a male yoga student, planting seeds of doubt in Dwayne's mind. She encouraged Sandra to take on more classes and responsibilities at her studio, knowing it would create more tension in the marriage. With the children, she would make offhand comments about how much happier everyone seemed when Mommy wasn't around, slowly poisoning their perception of Sandra. As her plan progressed, Zara took steps to create an alibi for herself. She enrolled in evening classes at the local community college, establishing a routine that would place her far from the Corin home on certain nights. She cultivated friendships with other babysitters in the neighborhood, ensuring she had people who could vouch for her character and whereabouts. One crucial element of Zara's plan involved technology. Using her knowledge from a brief stint in IT during college, she installed spyware on the family's computers and phones. This gave her access to emails, text messages, and even GPS locations. She used this information to stay one step ahead, always knowing where everyone was and what they were doing. Zara also began to alter her appearance subtly. She dyed her hair a shade closer to Sandra's, started wearing clothes that mimicked Sandra's style, and even adopted some of her mannerisms. In her deluded mind, she was preparing to step into Sandra's life seamlessly once the other woman was out of the picture. As the day she had chosen for her plan to culminate approached, Zara became more daring. She borrowed items from Sandra, a scarf here, a piece of jewelry there, things that could be used to implicate Sandra in nefarious activities if necessary. She also began to stockpile supplies, disposable gloves, cleaning products, and a set of clothes identical to what she planned to wear on the fateful day. Throughout all of this, Zara maintained her facade of normalcy. She continued to excel in her role as a babysitter, even receiving glowing praise from Sandra for her dedication. Dwayne, still guilt-ridden over the incident at the lake house, kept his distance, which only served to reinforce Zara's belief that he was unhappy in his marriage. The red flags were there, but they went unnoticed or were explained away. The slight changes in Zara's appearance were attributed to youthful experimentation. Her probing questions about the family's schedule were seen as conscientiousness. Even her occasional odd behavior was chalked up to the stress of working and studying. As summer turned to fall, the Corin family remained blissfully unaware of the danger that had taken root in their home. October 17th dawned crisp and clear. The autumn leaves a riot of red and gold against the pale blue sky. It was a day like any other in the community. But for Zara Jackman, it was the day everything would change. The day she would finally claim the life she believed was rightfully hers. Zara arrived at the Corin home early, her demeanor calm and collected. She greeted Sandra with a smile, discussing the day's schedule as if it were any other morning. Dwayne had already left for work, and the children were at school. Everything was proceeding according to plan. As Sandra prepared to leave for her morning yoga class, Zara made her move. She offered Sandra a smoothie, claiming it was a new energy-boosting recipe she'd learned. Sandra, always health-conscious, accepted gratefully. What she didn't know was that the smoothie was laced with a powerful sedative Zara had obtained through less than legal means. Within minutes, Sandra began to feel dizzy and disoriented. Zara, feigning concern, suggested she lie down for a moment. As Sandra's consciousness faded, Zara's mask of concern melted away, replaced by a cold determination. She methodically began to set her plan in motion. First, Zara changed into clothes identical to what Sandra had been wearing. She then carefully applied makeup to subtly alter her features, making herself look more like Sandra from a distance. With practiced ease, she gathered Sandra's personal effects, her phone, keys, and wallet. Next came the most crucial and disturbing part of her plan. Zara maneuvered Sandra's unconscious form into the trunk of Sandra's own car. She then drove to a pre-selected location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. There, in the dusty gloom, Zara committed the unthinkable act that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The details of what transpired in that warehouse would later shock even the most hardened detectives. Suffice it to say, Zara's actions were brutal and methodical. She had planned for every contingency, using her knowledge of forensics to minimize evidence. When it was over, Zara stood over Sandra's lifeless body, her hands shaking not with remorse but with a perverse sense of accomplishment. Zara then embarked on the next phase of her plan. She drove Sandra's car to a nearby lake, wiping it clean of fingerprints before pushing it into the water. She had chosen this spot carefully, knowing the depth and currents would make recovery difficult. With the grim task completed, Zara made her way back, using a series of prearranged rides and public transportation to avoid detection. She arrived back at the Corin home just in time to greet the children as they returned from school, the perfect picture of a caring babysitter. As evening fell, Zara put her acting skills to the test. She called Dwayne, her voice filled with convincing concern, asking if he had heard from Sandra. She then suggested calling Sandra's yoga studio and some of her friends. As worry began to set in, Zara proposed calling the police to report Sandra missing. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of police activity and growing fear. Zara played her part perfectly, the concerned family friend, offering support to Dwayne and comfort to the confused and frightened children. She answered the police's questions with just the right mix of helpfulness and anxiety, providing the alibi she had so carefully constructed. As night deepened and hope for Sandra's safe return diminished, Zara allowed herself a moment of private triumph. In her twisted mind, she had succeeded. Sandra was gone, and now she could step into the role she had coveted for so long. She imagined comforting Dwayne in his grief, becoming a mother to Lila and Theo, and finally having the family she believed she deserved. But even as Zara reveled in her perceived victory, the wheels of justice were already turning. The meticulous planning, the careful execution, none of it would be enough to hide the truth forever. The quiet community had been shattered by an act of unthinkable violence, and the aftermath would reveal dark secrets and shattered lives in ways no one could have anticipated. The disappearance of Sandra Corin sent shockwaves through the community. As dawn broke the day after Sandra vanished, the quiet suburb transformed into a hive of police activity. Detective Ava Ramirez, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, took charge of the investigation. The first 48 hours were crucial. Detective Ramirez and her team combed through the Corin home, searching for any clues that might shed light on Sandra's disappearance. They interviewed neighbors, colleagues, and friends, building a timeline of Sandra's last known movements. Initially, the prevailing theory was that Sandra had left of her own accord. There were whispers of marital problems, of Sandra feeling stifled in her role as a wife and mother, but those who knew her best vehemently rejected this idea. Sandra, they insisted, would never abandon her children. As the investigation progressed, suspicion inevitably fell on Dwayne. It was the sad reality of such cases that the spouse was often the first person of interest. Dwayne's alibi for the day of Sandra's disappearance was solid. He had been in meetings at work all day, verified by multiple colleagues. Still, detectives probed into the couple's financial records and personal lives, leaving no stone unturned. Throughout the investigation, Zara remained a peripheral figure. She was interviewed as a witness, providing a detailed account of her last interactions with Sandra. Her demeanor was appropriately distraught, her story consistent. To the investigators, she appeared to be nothing more than a concerned babysitter, genuinely worried about the woman who had employed her. A community rallied around the Corin family. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through nearby woods and parks. Flyers with Sandra's picture appeared on every street corner and in shop windows. Local news channels ran nightly updates on the case, keeping it in the public eye. As days turned into weeks with no sign of Sandra, the investigation began to stall. Leads dried up, and theories grew more speculative. Digging deeper, Ramirez discovered that Zara's impeccable credentials had been carefully fabricated. The university she claimed to have graduated from had no record of her attendance. References when contacted again seemed hesitant and evasive. It was as if Zara Jackman had appeared out of thin air just months before she started working for the Corin family. This revelation sparked a renewed investigation, this time focused on the babysitter who had seamlessly integrated herself into the Corin household. As Ramirez and her team delved into Zara's past, a disturbing pattern emerged. They uncovered a trail of false identities and suspicious circumstances stretching back several years. A breakthrough came when they connected Zara to a case in another state. A married man had reported being stalked by a young woman matching Zara's description. The case had been dropped when the woman suddenly disappeared, but the similarities were striking. Armed with this new information, Ramirez brought Zara in for questioning. The interrogation was a masterclass in psychological warfare. For hours, Zara maintained her innocence, her carefully constructed persona holding firm. But as Ramirez methodically presented the evidence they had gathered, cracks began to show in Zara's facade. It was a seemingly innocuous question about Zara's childhood that finally broke her. In a moment of confusion, Zara mentioned a detail about her past that contradicted her earlier statements. Sensing weakness, Ramirez pressed harder. Suddenly, like a dam breaking, Zara's composure crumbled. In a chilling confession, she revealed the full extent of her obsession with Dwayne and her plot to replace Sandra. As Zara talked, the true horror of her actions came to light. She described in disturbing detail how she had planned and executed Sandra's murder, her voice devoid of remorse as she recounted the events of that fateful day. She spoke of her belief that she and Dwayne were meant to be together, that she was saving him from an unhappy marriage. With Zara's confession, the investigation shifted into high gear. Based on the information she provided, search teams were dispatched to the lake where Sandra's car had been dumped. After days of searching, the vehicle was recovered, providing crucial forensic evidence. The abandoned warehouse where the murder had taken place became a crime scene, yielding more damning evidence against Zara. Investigators were shocked by the level of premeditation revealed by what they found. It was clear that Zara had been planning this for months. As news of Zara's arrest broke, the community reeled in shock. Neighbors who had invited her into their homes, parents who had trusted her with their children, all struggled to reconcile the friendly babysitter they thought they knew with the disturbed individual revealed by the investigation. As the case moved to trial, more details of Zara's troubled past came to light. A history of obsessive behavior, stalking, and identity fraud painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual. Mental health experts debated the extent of her psychological issues, but all agreed that she represented a dangerous combination of cunning and instability. The trial, Zara, now fully embracing her notoriety, showed no remorse for her actions. Her chilling testimony, recounting her obsession and the murder with an unsettling calmness, left the courtroom in stunned silence. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, from forensic analysis to Zara's own meticulous records of her plan. In the end, the jury took less than a day to reach a verdict. Zara Jackman was found guilty of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she was led from the courtroom, her final glance at Dwayne sent chills through all who witnessed it, a look not of remorse but of possessive longing. For the residents, the conclusion of the trial brought a mixture of relief and lingering unease. The picturesque suburb had lost its innocence, its sense of safety shattered by the knowledge that such darkness could lurk behind a friendly smile and a helping hand. At the center of this tragic tale were two individuals whose paths had crossed years earlier, only to collide again with devastating consequences. David Reeves, a 32-year-old software engineer, and Cassandra Cassie Pitt, a 30-year-old marketing executive, had once been lovers. Their romance, which had burned bright and fierce, ended in heartbreak and resentment. Neither could have imagined that a chance reconnection through a dating app would reignite a spark, not of love, but of deadly obsession. David Reeves was born on a sweltering summer day in 1991. From an early age, it was clear that David was gifted with an exceptional intellect. His parents, both academics at the University of Chicago, nurtured his curiosity and pushed him to excel in his studies. Growing up, David was surrounded by books and intellectual discourse. While this environment fostered his academic growth, it did little to develop his emotional intelligence or social skills. As a child, David often struggled to connect with his peers, finding solace instead in the logical world of mathematics and computer programming. At school, David's brilliance was evident, but so was his inability to navigate social situations. He was often the target of bullies, which only served to deepen his isolation and fuel a simmering resentment towards those he perceived as more socially adept. Despite these challenges, David's academic performance remained stellar, and he graduated as valedictorian of his high school class. David's exceptional grades and test scores earned him a full scholarship to the Institute of Technology, where he pursued a degree in computer science. It was during his college years that David began to come out of his shell, albeit slowly. He joined the robotics club and found a group of like-minded individuals who appreciated his intellect and quirky sense of humor. After graduating from MIT, David landed a prestigious position at a tech startup. His innovative ideas and tireless work ethic quickly propelled him up the corporate ladder. By the age of 28, he was leading his own team of developers, working on projects that promised to revolutionize the field of artificial intelligence. Despite his professional success, David's personal life remained a source of frustration and disappointment. His relationships were few and far between, often ending abruptly due to his intense nature and difficulty in expressing emotions. David's therapist, whom he began seeing in his late 20s, suggested that he might have undiagnosed high-functioning autism, which could explain his social struggles and intense focus on specific interests. As David entered his early 30s, he found himself increasingly lonely and unfulfilled. His parents, now retired and traveling the world, were largely absent from his life. Colleagues admired his brilliance, but kept their distance socially. It was in this state of emotional vulnerability that David would encounter Cassandra Pitt, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of both their lives. Cassandra Pitt's story began in the bustling city of Atlanta, Georgia, where she was born in 1993 to Elaine, a high school English teacher, and Desmond, a civil rights attorney. The youngest of three children, Cassie grew up in a household that valued education, social justice, and self-expression. From an early age, Cassie exhibited a natural charisma and an ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Her infectious laugh and quick wit made her popular among her peers, while her sharp intellect and curiosity endeared her to her teachers. Cassie's childhood was marked by a sense of adventure and a desire to experience all that life had to offer. Despite her outgoing nature, Cassie harbored a deep-seated insecurity about living up to her family's expectations. Her older siblings, both high achievers in their respective fields of medicine and law, cast long shadows. Cassie's passion for communication led her to pursue a degree in marketing and public relations. College life suited Cassie perfectly, allowing her to expand her horizons and explore new ideas. It was during her junior year that Cassie first began to question her sexuality. A close friendship with her roommate Valerie blossomed into a romantic relationship, leading Cassie to identify as bisexual. While her family was supportive, this period of self-discovery was not without its challenges, as Cassie navigated the complexities of her identity in the face of societal expectations. After graduation, Cassie's drive and talent landed her a position at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago. She threw herself into her work, quickly gaining a reputation as a creative problem solver and a skilled communicator. Her career flourished, and by the age of 28, she had been promoted to a senior executive position, overseeing major accounts for national brands. As she approached her 30th birthday, Cassie felt a mix of pride in her accomplishments and a gnawing sense that something was missing from her life. It was in this state of introspection that fate would bring David Reeves into her orbit, setting the stage for a relationship that would have far-reaching and ultimately tragic consequences. The paths of David Reeves and Cassandra Pitt first crossed on a chilly October evening at a tech industry networking event in downtown Chicago. David, there to represent his company's latest AI innovations, found himself drawn to the vibrant energy emanating from the marketing corner of the room. It was there that he first laid eyes on Cassie, who was captivating a small crowd with her animated description of a recent successful campaign. Intrigued by her eloquence and charm, David mustered the courage to approach Cassie after her presentation. Their initial conversation was a blend of awkward pauses and unexpected connections. Cassie was impressed by David's depth of knowledge and unique perspectives, while David was captivated by Cassie's ability to make complex concepts accessible and engaging. Exchanging contact information, they parted ways that evening with a sense of potential hanging in the air. Over the next few weeks, their communication evolved from sporadic professional emails to daily text exchanges filled with witty banter and shared interests. Their first date, a visit to the Art Institute of Chicago, was a study in contrasts. David's meticulous analysis of brushstrokes and historical context was balanced by Cassie's emotional responses to the art and her ability to weave narratives around each piece. Despite their different approaches, both found the experience enriching, and the spark between them grew stronger. As their relationship developed, David and Cassie seemed to complement each other in unexpected ways. Cassie drew David out of his shell, encouraging him to experience life beyond the confines of his work and routines. In turn, David's steadiness and intellectual depth provided Cassie with a sense of grounding she hadn't realized she was missing. However, as the initial glow of romance began to fade, the fundamental differences in their personalities became more pronounced. David's need for structure and predictability often clashed with Cassie's spontaneity and social nature. Arguments became more frequent, with David's difficulty in expressing emotions and Cassie's frustration with his perceived emotional distance creating a widening rift between them. The breaking point came 8 months into their relationship when Cassie was offered a promotion that would require extensive travel. David, unable to cope with the idea of long distance and change, retreated into himself. His behavior became increasingly possessive and demanding, attempting to control aspects of Cassie's life in a misguided effort to keep her close. Feeling suffocated and recognizing the unhealthy patterns in their relationship, Cassie made the difficult decision to end things. The breakup was messy and emotionally charged. David, unable to process the rejection, alternated between pleading for another chance and lashing out with hurtful accusations. In the aftermath, Cassie threw herself into her new role, using work as a buffer against the emotional fallout. David, on the other hand, spiraled into a deep depression, his work suffering as he obsessed over what went wrong and how he could win Cassie back. As weeks turned into months, their lives diverged. Cassie began to heal and move forward, while David remained stuck in a loop of anger, self-pity, and fantasies of reconciliation. Neither could have predicted that their paths would cross again, or the tragic consequences that would follow when they did. The 3 years following David and Cassie's breakup saw their lives take dramatically different trajectories. Cassie, embracing her new role and the opportunities it presented, threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. Her career flourished as she spearheaded innovative marketing campaigns that garnered industry recognition. She traveled extensively, broadening her horizons and forging new connections both professionally and personally. During this time, Cassie explored her identity further, engaging in a series of relationships that helped her better understand her needs and desires. She dated both men and women, each experience teaching her more about herself and what she truly wanted in a partner. Through therapy and self-reflection, Cassie worked on setting healthier boundaries and communicating her needs more effectively. David, in stark contrast, struggled to move past the breakup. His work, once his primary source of pride and fulfillment, began to suffer as he grappled with depression and obsessive thoughts about Cassie. Colleagues noticed his declining performance and erratic behavior, leading to a series of warnings from his superiors. In an attempt to fill the void left by Cassie, David tried dating again, but each attempt ended in disappointment. He found himself constantly comparing these women to Cassie, always finding them lacking. His therapist encouraged him to focus on personal growth and healing, but David's sessions often devolved into ruminations about his past relationship and fantasies of reconciliation. As time passed, David's obsession with Cassie didn't wane, but instead took on a darker tone. He began monitoring her social media accounts religiously, creating elaborate stories in his mind about her life and the reasons for their breakup. Unbeknownst to Cassie, David had started driving by her apartment and favorite haunts, always careful to remain undetected. Both David and Cassie continued to live, their paths occasionally crossing at local establishments. These brief, awkward encounters only served to fuel David's obsession and reinforce Cassie's decision to end the relationship. Neither could have foreseen how a simple swipe on a dating app would soon shatter the fragile peace of their separate lives. On a quiet Sunday evening in September, David found himself mindlessly scrolling through a popular dating app. His therapist had suggested he try to meet new people, but David's heart wasn't in it. He was using the app when a familiar face caught his eye. There, smiling back at him from the screen, was Cassie. David's heart raced as he stared at her profile. The photos were recent, showing Cassie at various events and travels. Her bio was witty and confident, highlighting her love for adventure and passion for her work. Without hesitation, David swiped right, his mind already spinning with possibilities. To his shock and elation, it was a match. Cassie had swiped right on him too, though her reasons were far different from David's. For Cassie, seeing David's profile had been a surprise, but she had swiped right out of a mixture of curiosity and a desire for closure. She hoped that enough time had passed for them to have a mature conversation, and perhaps even forge a friendship. David wasted no time in sending a message. "Hey Cassie, long time no see." His casual tone belied the trembling of his hands as he typed. Cassie's response came the next day. "Hi David, this is a surprise. I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?" Their initial exchange was polite but guarded. David, interpreting Cassie's responses through the lens of his fantasies, saw signs of lingering affection where there were none. He quickly steered the conversation towards meeting up, suggesting they grab coffee to catch up properly. Cassie, sensing David's eagerness, felt a twinge of unease. She gently deflected, saying she was busy with work, but suggesting they could chat more on the app for now. Over the next few days, their conversations continued sporadically. David became increasingly bold, reminiscing about their past and hinting at his desire to rekindle their relationship. Cassie, growing uncomfortable with the direction of their chats, decided to be direct. In a carefully worded message, Cassie explained that while she valued the good times they had shared, she wasn't interested in revisiting their romantic relationship. She expressed hope that they could be friends, but made it clear that anything more was off the table. For David, Cassie's rejection was like a physical blow. All the progress he thought he had made in therapy crumbled in an instant. As he read and reread her message, his sadness quickly turned to anger. The old feelings of betrayal and resentment resurfaced with a vengeance, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. In the days following Cassie's rejection, David's mental state rapidly deteriorated. The carefully constructed facade of normalcy he had maintained over the past 3 years crumbled, revealing the depths of his obsession and instability. He called in sick to work, isolating himself in his apartment, which quickly became a reflection of his chaotic mind. He created elaborate timelines and conspiracy-style stringboards, trying to piece together the real reason Cassie had rejected him. In his delusional state, David convinced himself that Cassie was being manipulated by others, that she couldn't possibly have rejected him of her own free will. His online behavior became increasingly erratic. David created multiple fake profiles on various social media platforms, using them to interact with Cassie and gather more information about her life. He spent hours analyzing her posts, likes, and comments, looking for hidden messages he believed were meant for him. David's obsession soon spilled over into the physical world. He began following Cassie, carefully documenting her daily routines, the places she frequented and the people she interacted with. He was meticulous in his stalking, always staying just out of sight, convinced that if he could just understand her life fully, he would find the key to winning her back. As weeks passed, David's grip on reality continued to slip. He stopped attending therapy, convinced that his therapist was part of the conspiracy to keep him and Cassie apart. His personal hygiene and living conditions deteriorated, but he barely noticed, so consumed was he by his obsession. David's work suffered severely. When he did show up at the office, his behavior was erratic and his performance subpar. Concerned colleagues tried to reach out, but David pushed them away, growing paranoid that they too were working against him. It wasn't long before he was called into a meeting with HR and placed on indefinite leave, pending a psychological evaluation. This professional setback only served to fuel David's delusions. With no job to distract him, he devoted all his time and energy to his obsession with Cassie. He convinced himself that if he could just talk to her face to face, he could make her understand that they were meant to be together. David's planning became more sinister. He purchased a gun through an illegal online marketplace, justifying it to himself as protection against the imagined forces keeping him and Cassie apart. He spent hours practicing what he would say to Cassie, rehearsing scenarios that always ended with her realizing her mistake and falling back into his arms. As his mental state deteriorated further, David's fantasies took on a darker tone. He began to entertain thoughts of forcing Cassie to listen to him, of making her understand their connection by any means necessary. The line between love and obsession blurred completely in his mind, replaced by a singular all-consuming need to possess Cassie. On a crisp autumn morning, David woke with a sense of clarity that had eluded him for weeks. He showered, shaved, and dressed with care, as if preparing for a long-awaited date. In his twisted mind, this was to be the day when everything would finally be set right. With the gun tucked into his waistband and a bouquet of roses in his hand, David set out to confront the object of his obsession, oblivious to the tragedy he was about to unleash. The morning of October 15th, Cassie Pitt began her day as she always did, with a brisk jog through the neighborhood, followed by a cup of coffee on her balcony. She had no way of knowing that just a few blocks away, David Reeves was watching her through binoculars, waiting for the right moment to make his move. As Cassie prepared to leave for work, David made his way to her apartment building. His heart raced with anticipation, the weight of the gun at his waist a constant reminder of the power he now held. He positioned himself near the entrance, the bouquet of roses clutched tightly in his trembling hands. When Cassie emerged from the building, David called out her name. She froze, recognizing his voice instantly. As she turned to face him, a mix of surprise and fear flashed across her features. "David, what are you doing here?" David's rehearsed speech abandoned him at the sight of Cassie. Instead, he thrust the roses toward her, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Cassie, please, we need to talk. I know you didn't mean what you said. We belong together." Cassie's initial shock quickly gave way to anger. She took a step back, her voice firm as she replied, "David, I meant every word. You need to leave." But David was beyond reason. He advanced towards Cassie, his free hand reaching for her arm. "You don't understand. They've been lying to you, manipulating you. I'm the only one who truly loves you." Cassie's training in self-defense kicked in. She twisted away from David's grasp, her voice rising as she shouted for help and calling the police. The mention of the police shattered the last of David's delusions. In a fluid motion born of desperation, he pulled the gun from his waistband. The roses fell forgotten to the ground as he leveled the weapon at Cassie. Cassie's eyes widened in terror at the sight of the gun. She raised her hands in a placating gesture, her voice shaking as she tried to reason with him. For a moment, David hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face as he stared into Cassie's pleading eyes. But then he caught sight of her phone in her hand, the screen showing a half-dialed 911 call. Something snapped inside him. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. David lunged forward, grabbing for the phone. Cassie resisted, struggling to break free. In the scuffle, a shot rang out, echoing through the quiet morning air. Time seemed to stand still as Cassie stumbled backward, a look of shock and disbelief on her face. She looked down at the spreading red stain on her blouse. David stood frozen, the gun still clutched in his shaking hand. The reality of what he had done crashed over him like a tidal wave. As Cassie collapsed to the ground, neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. David, panicking, turned and fled, leaving behind the woman he claimed to love bleeding on the sidewalk. In the distance, sirens began to wail, growing louder with each passing second. But for Cassie, lying on the cold concrete, those sirens would come too late. The tranquil morning was shattered by the arrival of police cars and ambulances, their sirens piercing the air as they converged on Cassie's house. Detective Eliana Vasquez, a veteran of the police department's homicide unit, arrived on the scene within minutes of the first 911 call. As paramedics fought to save Cassie's life, Detective Vasquez began the painstaking process of piecing together the events of the morning. She cordoned off the area, preserving the crime scene for the forensics team. The discarded roses, the shell casing from the fired bullet, and the blood-stained concrete all told a partial story of the tragedy that had unfolded. Witnesses were quickly identified and separated for interviews. A resident of the building had been watering her plants on her balcony when she heard the commotion. She described seeing a man matching David's description fleeing the scene, providing the first solid lead in the case. As the forensics team combed the area for evidence, Detective Vasquez turned her attention to Cassie's background. A preliminary search of Cassie's phone, retrieved from the scene, revealed the recent interactions with David on the dating app. This discovery quickly established David as the prime suspect. The investigation expanded rapidly. Detectives were dispatched to David's apartment and workplace, while others began the process of tracing his movements in the days leading up to the shooting. His recent leave of absence from work and erratic behavior painted a picture of a man unraveling. Interviews with Cassie's friends and colleagues revealed the history between her and David, shedding light on the toxic nature of their past relationship and David's inability to move on. Each new piece of information added to the growing profile of David as a dangerous and unstable individual. The search for David quickly escalated into an intense manhunt. As dawn broke on the second day after the shooting, law enforcement agencies from across the state joined the effort, transforming the quiet suburb into a hive of police activity. As the manhunt entered its third day, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A homeless man reported seeing someone matching David's description entering an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The tip was initially met with skepticism, but given the lack of other leads, Detective Vasquez decided to pursue it. A tactical team was assembled, and in the early hours of the morning they moved in on the warehouse. The tension was palpable as they methodically cleared the building, the silence broken only by the crackle of their radios and the echo of their footsteps on the concrete floor. In a dramatic turn of events, David was found, barely recognizable from the man in the widely circulated photos. Disheveled, malnourished, and clearly in a state of mental distress, he offered no resistance as he was taken into custody. Detective Vasquez, bleary-eyed but determined, conducted the initial interrogation. David, still in a state of shock, alternated between periods of eerie calm and emotional outbursts. His ramblings about conspiracies and his delusional belief that he and Cassie were meant to be together painted a disturbing picture of his mental state. Within hours of his arrest, David was assigned a public defender. She immediately requested a psychological evaluation, setting the stage for what would become a central issue in the case: David's mental competency to stand trial. As the legal proceedings unfolded, a team of forensic psychiatrists began the arduous task of evaluating David's mental state. Their findings would be crucial in determining whether he would face trial or be remanded to a psychiatric facility. Meanwhile, the prosecution meticulously gathered evidence from David's apartment, including the walls covered with photos and timelines of Cassie's life. His internet search history revealed a disturbing pattern of stalking behavior and research on untraceable weapons. Pre-trial motions flew back and forth. The defense sought to suppress evidence from David's apartment, arguing it was obtained without proper warrant. The prosecution fought to include David's dating app conversations with Cassie as evidence of premeditation. The verdict in the trial of David Reeves sent shockwaves through the community. Found guilty of first-degree murder but mentally ill, David was sentenced to life in a high-security psychiatric facility, with the possibility of transfer to prison if his mental state improved. In the wake of the trial, the community struggled to heal. The case had exposed the vulnerabilities that existed even in their seemingly idyllic suburb, leading to increased awareness about stalking and domestic violence. Amanda Everwood, with her chestnut hair and piercing blue eyes, was the epitome of elegance and creativity. Born into a family of artists, her childhood home was filled with the scent of oil paints and the sight of canvases in various stages of completion. Amanda had inherited her mother's talent and her father's determination, quickly making a name for herself as an exceptional landscape artist. Her works were known for their vibrant colors and the way they captured the soul of nature. Richard Everwood, in contrast, came from a lineage of lawyers. The Everwood family was renowned for their legal prowess, with generations serving as judges, attorneys, and legal scholars. Richard was no different. He excelled in law school, graduating top of his class, and quickly climbed the ranks at one of the most prestigious law firms in Belleville. His charm, good looks, and sharp mind made him a formidable attorney and a desirable husband. Amanda and Richard met during their sophomore year of college. It was a classic case of opposites. Attracting Amanda's free-spirited nature complemented Richard's structured and disciplined approach to life. They fell in love quickly, their relationship blossoming amidst late-night study sessions, gallery openings, and summer road trips. After graduating, they married in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of Belleville. They settled into a beautiful Victorian home that Amanda adored. She transformed it into a haven filled with art, music, and love. The house had a large garden where Amanda often painted, drawing inspiration from the vibrant flowers and the changing seasons. Richard, on the other hand, was dedicated to his work, often spending long hours at the office. They had a son, Ethan, who became the center of Amanda's world. Their life seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Amanda's days were filled with painting, volunteering at the local art center, and taking care of Ethan. Richard's career continued to flourish, and he was soon made partner at his firm. They attended glamorous parties and charity events, where they were often the center of attention. However, as the years went by, Amanda noticed subtle changes in Richard. He became more distant, often coming home late and leaving early in the morning. The once warm and affectionate man she married was now cold and preoccupied. Amanda tried to ignore these changes, attributing them to the stress of his demanding job. However, the gnawing suspicion in the back of her mind grew stronger with each passing day. Carla Monroe entered their lives when Richard hired her as his personal secretary. Carla was stunning, with her dark, cascading hair, sharp features, and an aura of confidence that turned heads wherever she went. She was efficient, intelligent, and seemed to understand Richard in a way that Amanda no longer could. It wasn't long before Amanda's suspicions turned towards Carla. One evening, Amanda decided to confront Richard. She prepared a candlelit dinner, hoping to reignite the spark in their relationship and to get him to open up. As they sat across from each other at the dining table, Amanda poured her heart out, expressing her concerns and fears. Richard listened, but dismissed her worries, attributing his behavior to the pressures of his job. He assured her that there was nothing to worry about, but Amanda wasn't convinced. Determined to uncover the truth, Amanda hired a private investigator named Mark Collins. Mark was a seasoned professional with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Over the next few weeks, he followed Richard and Carla, documenting their interactions. The evidence he gathered was damning. Late-night dinners, weekends away, and intimate encounters that left no room for doubt. Richard was having an affair with Carla. Amanda felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a deep sadness. She couldn't understand how Richard could do this to their family. But amidst her turmoil, she also felt a strange sense of relief. At least now she knew the truth, and she could decide what to do next. Armed with the evidence, Amanda's initial devastation gave way to a steely resolve. She decided to confront Carla first, hoping to gather more information before dealing with Richard. Amanda arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing a charity event that Richard's firm was sponsoring. Carla, unaware of Amanda's true intentions, agreed to meet at a chic downtown cafe. The cafe was a cozy, intimate space with soft lighting and plush seating. Amanda arrived early, choosing a secluded corner table where they could talk privately. Carla walked in a few minutes later, exuding confidence and poise. As she approached the table, Amanda felt a mixture of anger and curiosity. Carla greeted Amanda warmly and commented on how beautiful the cafe was. Amanda, hiding her true feelings, replied politely and steered the conversation towards Richard. She mentioned how Richard had been spending a lot of time at the office and asked how he was handling the workload. Carla responded that Richard was incredibly dedicated and that the cases he was working on required a lot of his time and attention. Amanda then leaned in and, in a low voice, told Carla that she knew about the affair. Carla's face paled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but Amanda stopped her, saying she wasn't there to accuse or blame her. Amanda just wanted to understand why it happened. Carla, with tears in her eyes, explained that it started a few years ago when Richard was going through a rough patch at work. They began spending more time together, and one thing led to another. As Carla spoke, Amanda felt a strange sense of empathy. She could see the pain in Carla's eyes, a reflection of her own turmoil. By the end of the conversation, they had formed an unexpected connection. Amanda was captivated by Carla's intelligence and charisma, while Carla found solace in Amanda's understanding and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Amanda and Carla continued to meet in secret. What had started as a confrontation evolved into a complex relationship. Their meetings became more frequent, and their bond deepened. One evening, Carla invited Amanda to her apartment, ostensibly to review some documents related to the charity event. The apartment was a stylish modern space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. As they sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking, the tension between them grew palpable. Carla set her glass down and looked into Amanda's eyes, saying that she had developed feelings for her. Amanda's heart raced. She had felt the same way, but had been too afraid to admit it. She confessed that she felt the same way. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, and that night, they crossed the line from emotional connection to physical intimacy. The affair was intense, a whirlwind of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. Amanda felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, but she was also plagued by guilt and fear. They would meet in secluded spots around the city, hidden corners of parks, out-of-the-way cafes, and Carla's apartment, where they felt free from the prying eyes of the world. Their conversations ranged from deep, philosophical discussions to light-hearted banter. They shared their hopes, dreams, and fears, forming a bond that went beyond physical attraction. However, Amanda was acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation. She knew that if Richard found out, the consequences would be dire. Despite this, she couldn't bring herself to end the affair. Carla had become an essential part of her life, filling a void that she hadn't realized existed. Richard's suspicions grew as he noticed Amanda's changed behavior. She was more distant, often lost in thought, and seemed to have a newfound sense of confidence. Richard's paranoia led him to install a hidden camera in Carla's apartment, suspecting that Amanda might have discovered his affair and was plotting against him. When Richard reviewed the footage and saw his wife with Carla, his rage and sense of betrayal reached a boiling point. He felt emasculated and humiliated, convinced that both women had conspired against him. Richard began to meticulously plan his revenge, determined to regain control over his life. One stormy night, Richard invited Amanda to his office under the pretense of wanting to discuss their relationship and find a way forward. Amanda, hopeful for reconciliation, agreed. As she entered Richard's dimly lit office, she was struck by the coldness in his eyes. Richard told Amanda to sit down, his voice devoid of emotion. Amanda took a seat, her heart pounding. She started to speak, but Richard cut her off, slamming a folder of photographs on the desk. He said he knew everything and knew about her and Carla. Amanda's eyes widened in shock as she looked at the incriminating photos. She pleaded with Richard to let her explain, but he was beyond reason. He lunged at Amanda, his hands closing around her throat. Amanda struggled, clawing at his hands, but Richard's grip was unrelenting. Her vision darkened, and within moments she was gone. Richard stood over Amanda's lifeless body, his mind a whirlwind of rage and confusion. He knew he had to act quickly to cover his tracks. He staged the scene to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, ransacking the office and scattering papers everywhere. He then drove to Carla's apartment, his anger boiling over. Carla was startled to see Richard at her door. She asked what he was doing there, her voice trembling. Richard pushed past her, his eyes wild with fury. He accused her of ruining everything and seducing his wife, destroying his family. Carla backed away, fear gripping her heart, and begged Richard to listen to her and understand that it wasn't like that. But Richard was beyond listening. He lunged at Carla, but she managed to evade him, grabbing a heavy vase and smashing it over his head. Richard staggered, momentarily disoriented. Carla seized the opportunity and fled. Running into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back, she ran through the rain-soaked streets, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She had to get as far away from Richard as possible. She knew that if he caught her, he would kill her. Carla reached the outskirts of town and found an old abandoned cabin. She slipped inside, her body trembling with adrenaline and terror. The next morning, Ethan Everwood found himself without a mother and soon without a father. Richard, attempting to cover his tracks, reported Amanda missing and fabricated an alibi for himself. However, the police quickly uncovered inconsistencies in his story. Amanda's body was discovered in Richard's office, and forensic evidence, along with Richard's erratic behavior, pointed to his guilt. He was arrested and later convicted of Amanda's murder, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Carla, meanwhile, had vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned at a rest stop, miles away from Belleville. There were rumors that she had fled the country, but no concrete evidence ever emerged. Some speculated she had started a new life under an assumed identity. Carla's disappearance puzzled many. Growing up in a household marked by religious fervor and violence, Carla had endured years of suppression and fear. Fleeing wasn't just an escape, it was a lifeline to freedom. She feared the repercussions of being discovered by her family, knowing all too well the horrors they could unleash upon her, driving her to vanish without a trace, leaving behind a life of oppression for one of uncertain liberty. Ethan, now orphaned, was taken in by Amanda's sister Lydia, who raised him with love and care. The Everwood home, once filled with laughter and love, stood silent, a stark reminder of the tragic events that had unfolded. Lydia did her best to create a stable environment for Ethan, but the shadow of his parents' tragedy loomed large over his childhood. She often wondered what kind of man Ethan would grow up to be, carrying the weight of such a dark legacy. Carla's escape was not without difficulty. She knew she had to leave Belleville and disappear completely. She had some cash saved up and used it to buy a bus ticket to the nearest big city. From there, she moved from place to place, using different names and taking on various odd jobs to survive. Her once confident and poised demeanor was replaced by constant anxiety and fear of being recognized. Carla found temporary solace in small towns, where she could blend into the background. She dyed her hair, changed her appearance, and avoided making close connections with anyone. Each time she felt someone might recognize her, she moved on. Her life became a series of temporary stays and fleeting moments of peace. She missed Amanda deeply, and often dreamed about their time together, the passion they shared and the plans they had made. In a small coastal town far from Belleville, Carla finally found a semblance of stability. She took on a job at a local diner, working long hours and keeping to herself. The town was quiet, and the people were friendly but respectful of her privacy. For the first time in months, Carla began to relax and let her guard down a little. She rented a small, modest apartment and tried to rebuild her life, though the fear of being discovered never entirely left her. Ethan, now a teenager, struggled with the burden of his family's dark history. He was a quiet, introspective boy, often lost in thought. Lydia did her best to provide a loving home, but Ethan couldn't escape the whispers and stares from those who knew about his parents. School was a challenge, with classmates either avoiding him or bullying him for his father's crime. Ethan found solace in books and spent hours at the local library, immersing himself in stories far removed from his reality. Lydia encouraged Ethan to pursue his interests, hoping to provide him with a positive outlet. He developed a passion for writing, pouring his emotions and experiences into his stories. His teachers noticed his talent and encouraged him to pursue a career in literature. Despite the darkness of his past, Ethan found hope in the future he could create for himself. One day, while browsing through old family photo albums, Ethan came across a photograph of his parents during happier times. They looked so in love, so full of life. He wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Determined to understand, Ethan began to dig deeper into his family's history. He read old newspaper articles, interviewed people who had known his parents, and pieced together the story of their lives. Ethan's investigation led him to discover the affair between his father and Carla. He was shocked and saddened by the betrayal, but he also felt a strange connection to Carla. He wondered what had happened to her after that fateful night. His search for answers led him to contact Mark Collins, the private investigator Amanda had hired. Mark, now retired, was hesitant to reopen old wounds but was moved by Ethan's determination. Mark shared with Ethan the details of his investigation, the evidence he had gathered, and the events that had transpired. Ethan learned about the confrontation between his mother and Carla, their subsequent affair, and the night his mother was murdered. Ethan felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep need for closure. Determined to find Carla, Ethan followed the trail she had left behind. He visited the places she had stayed, talked to people who had encountered her, and slowly pieced together her journey. The trail eventually led him to the small coastal town where Carla was now living. Carla was working her usual shift at the diner when Ethan walked in. She didn't recognize him at first, but as he approached her, she saw a familiar sadness in his eyes. Ethan introduced himself, explaining that he was Amanda and Richard's son. Carla was stunned and filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She invited Ethan to sit down, and they began to talk. Ethan told Carla about his life, his struggles, and his search for answers. Carla, in turn, shared her story, her escape, and her attempts to rebuild her life. They talked for hours, sharing their pain and their memories of Amanda. Carla revealed how deeply she had loved Amanda, and how the affair had been a source of both joy and torment. Ethan asked Carla about the night his mother was murdered. Carla recounted the events, her voice trembling with emotion. She told him how Richard had confronted her, his rage and violence, and her desperate escape. Ethan listened intently, feeling a mix of anger towards his father and compassion for Carla. Ethan decided to stay in the coastal town for a while, to get to know Carla better, and to find some closure for himself. They spent a lot of time together, talking about Amanda, sharing stories, and helping each other heal. Carla found comfort in Ethan's presence, and Ethan felt a sense of connection and understanding that he had never felt before. As time went on, Ethan and Carla's relationship grew stronger. They became a support system for each other, helping to heal the wounds of the past. Ethan continued to write, inspired by the stories Carla had shared and the strength he saw in her. Carla found a new sense of purpose, helping Ethan and finding a way to move forward with her life. Years passed, and Ethan published his first novel, a fictionalized account of his family's story. The book received critical acclaim, and Ethan was praised for his emotional depth and storytelling ability. He dedicated the book to his mother, Amanda, and to Carla, who had shown him the importance of understanding and forgiveness. Carla, meanwhile, continued to live in the coastal town, finding peace and stability. She stayed in touch with Ethan, visiting him often and watching him grow into a successful writer. She found solace in the fact that she had been able to help Ethan find closure and that they had both found a way to move forward. The Everwood murders became a notorious case in Belleville, a cautionary tale of deceit, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of hidden passions. Amanda's art gained a lot of fame, her landscapes now imbued with a haunting beauty that drew admirers from afar. Richard's name, once respected, became synonymous with tragedy and madness. Years later, the town still whispered about Carla Monroe, the enigmatic secretary who disappeared into the night. Her fate remained one of Belleville's greatest mysteries, a lingering shadow over the tragic tale of the Everwood family. Ethan grew up carrying the weight of his parents' legacy, determined to forge a different path and break free from the cycle of betrayal and violence. In the end, the story of the Everwood murders served as a stark reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the devastating consequences of secrets and lies. It was a tale that would be told for generations, a dark chapter in the history of Belleville that would never be forgotten. Ethan continued to write, his works often exploring themes of love, betrayal, and redemption. His novels resonated with readers, many of whom were unaware of the true story behind his words. Despite the darkness of his past, Ethan found a way to turn his pain into art, creating something beautiful from the ashes of his family's tragedy. In the end, the Everwood murders were more than just a crime. They were a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of forgiveness. The lives of those involved were forever changed, but they found a way to move forward, to find peace, and create something new from the ruins of their past. Emily Parker was born and raised in the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio. Her parents, Richard and Ann Parker, were well-respected members of the community. Richard owned a local hardware store, while Ann was a nurse at the nearby hospital. Emily, the middle child with an older brother, Jack, and a younger sister, Sarah, was the apple of her parents' eyes. From an early age, Emily exhibited a zest for life. She was an exceptional student, excelling in her studies and participating in various extracurricular activities. Her passion for teaching emerged during her high school years, inspired by a history teacher who brought the past to life in vivid detail. Emily pursued her dream by attending Ohio State University, where she earned her degree in education. After college, Emily returned to Maplewood and secured a teaching position at the local elementary school. Her dedication to her students was unparalleled. She often stayed late to help with after-school programs and tutored struggling students on weekends. Her colleagues admired her enthusiasm, and parents often requested her for their children's classes. Outside of her professional life, Emily had a wide range of interests. She loved hiking, photography, and reading historical novels. Her weekends were often spent exploring nature trails or curled up with a good book. Friends described her as warm, compassionate, and always ready to lend a helping hand. Emily met David Reynolds at a friend's wedding. He was charming, with a quick wit and an easy smile. David, a financial consultant from New York City, was visiting for the wedding. The attraction was immediate, and their whirlwind romance took everyone by surprise. David lavished Emily with attention, expensive gifts, and exotic trips. Their courtship was brief but intense, and within a year David proposed. Emily, swept off her feet by his charisma and the promise of a glamorous life, said yes. Her family and friends had mixed feelings about the rapid engagement. While they wanted to support Emily's happiness, they couldn't shake a sense of unease about David. He was always impeccably dressed, driving luxury cars and staying in upscale hotels, but his extravagant lifestyle seemed at odds with his modest background. Emily, however, was enamored and reassured everyone that David was her soulmate. Their wedding was a grand affair, held in a picturesque vineyard and attended by over 200 guests. Emily's friends from Maplewood and David's associates from New York mingled under fairy lights and sipped champagne, celebrating the union. As the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon in St. Lucia, no one could have predicted the dark turn their love story would take. David Reynolds was born and raised in Queens, New York. His parents, Thomas and Margaret Reynolds, struggled to make ends meet. Thomas worked as a mechanic, while Margaret held various part-time jobs to support their 3 children. David, the eldest, grew up with a strong drive to escape the financial hardships of his upbringing. From a young age, David exhibited a knack for numbers and a shrewd understanding of money. He excelled in school, earning a scholarship to New York University where he studied finance. David's ambition was evident. He spent his college years networking and securing internships at prestigious firms. His relentless work ethic paid off, and upon graduation, he landed a coveted position at a top financial consultancy. David quickly rose through the ranks, his talent for investment strategies and financial planning earning him a reputation as a rising star. His success afforded him a lifestyle he had always dreamed of: designer suits, high-end cars, and a luxury apartment in Manhattan. However, his professional success masked deeper issues. Colleagues often described David as charming but ruthless, willing to bend the rules to achieve his goals. David's personal life was equally complex. His charm attracted many women, but his relationships were often short-lived. He had a series of high-profile romances, each ending abruptly amid rumors of infidelity and deceit. Despite this, he maintained a polished public image, carefully curating his social media to portray a life of sophistication and success. When David met Emily Parker, she represented something different. Her genuine warmth and small-town innocence were a stark contrast to the superficial relationships he was accustomed to. To his friends, it seemed like David was truly in love for the first time. But as their relationship progressed, cracks began to appear. David's financial empire was not as solid as it seemed. Behind the scenes, he was entangled in risky investments and mounting debts. David's financial troubles were compounded by his extravagant spending habits. He kept these issues hidden from Emily, presenting only the image of a successful and devoted partner. His decision to propose was as much about securing a future with Emily as it was about seeking stability amid his growing financial chaos. Their wedding, though a joyous occasion, also marked the point where David's deceptions began to catch up with him. St. Lucia, with its lush landscapes and serene beaches, was the perfect backdrop for David and Emily's honeymoon. They stayed at an exclusive resort, their bungalow perched on the edge of a secluded cove. The first few days were filled with romantic dinners, sunset walks, and excursions to explore the island's natural beauty. Emily documented their adventures on social media, her posts filled with joy and excitement. On the night of Emily's disappearance, the couple dined at the resort's beachfront restaurant. The atmosphere was idyllic. Soft music played in the background, and tiki torches flickered in the gentle breeze. Fellow diners noticed the couple laughing and holding hands, seemingly in love. The staff, accustomed to honeymooners, paid them little special attention. After dinner, David suggested a moonlit walk along the beach. Emily, always one for romance, readily agreed. They strolled along the water's edge, the sound of the waves mingling with their conversation. David later recounted that Emily had expressed a desire to take a swim. She slipped off her sandals and waded into the water, the moonlight casting a silver glow on her figure. According to David, he returned to their bungalow to fetch a jacket for Emily. When he came back, she was gone. Panic set in as he searched the beach, calling her name. He alerted the resort staff, who joined the search, but Emily was nowhere to be found. David's distress seemed genuine as he spoke with the resort's manager, his voice cracking and hands trembling. The following morning, the local police were notified. They began an immediate investigation, questioning resort staff and guests. Divers searched the waters near the beach, and sniffer dogs were brought in to track any scent that might lead to Emily. Despite their efforts, no clues emerged. The beach was combed for any personal items, but nothing was found. As the hours turned into days, David's behavior began to attract scrutiny. He appeared genuinely distraught, but there were moments when his composure seemed forced. The police noted his meticulous recounting of events, almost as if rehearsed. Resort staff mentioned his insistence on calling his lawyer soon after Emily's disappearance, which struck them as odd. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts. Some recalled seeing the couple arguing earlier in the day, while others described them as affectionate. A few guests reported hearing raised voices from their bungalow the night before Emily vanished. The police were left with a puzzling mix of evidence and testimonies that painted an inconsistent picture of the couple's final hours together. As the investigation stalled, David's narrative was the only story available. His plea for information was broadcast on news networks, his tearful face becoming the public image of a grieving husband. Yet behind the scenes, Detective Hayes was piecing together a different story, one that hinted at a more sinister truth. Detective Hayes arrived at the resort, greeted by the tropical heat and the sight of tourists enjoying their vacations, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding. His first step was to interview David Reynolds. Sitting across from him in the resort's lounge, Hayes observed David's demeanor carefully. The man seemed genuinely distraught, but there was an underlying tension that the seasoned detective couldn't ignore. David recounted the events of the night Emily disappeared, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. Hayes listened intently, asking pointed questions about their activities, their relationship, and any possible reasons Emily might have had to leave suddenly. David's answers were consistent, but Hayes felt they were too polished, as if rehearsed. The detective then spoke with the resort staff and other guests. The accounts varied, some aligning with David's story while others contradicted it. A waitress at the restaurant mentioned that David seemed agitated during dinner, frequently checking his phone. A couple staying in a neighboring bungalow reported hearing an argument late at night, although they couldn't make out the words. Hayes' team searched the couple's bungalow and the surrounding area. They found Emily's belongings neatly packed, her passport and wallet untouched. Her phone was missing, presumably with her. A thorough examination of the beach yielded no new clues. The tide and weather had likely washed away any trace evidence. As the days passed, the investigation broadened. Hayes looked into David's background, finding a man who was both successful and secretive. His financial records revealed a troubling pattern. Despite his high-paying job, David was deep in debt. Large withdrawals from his accounts suggested a gambling problem, and several investments had failed spectacularly. Hayes interviewed David's colleagues and friends in New York, uncovering a different side of him. They described David as charming but unreliable, with a penchant for risky ventures and a history of romantic entanglements. One colleague, who requested anonymity, mentioned that David had recently been involved in a scandal at work, hinting at financial misconduct. The detectives' team also analyzed phone records and bank statements, uncovering a web of transactions that pointed to financial distress. Several large transfers had been made to offshore accounts, and David had taken out substantial loans shortly before the wedding. These findings suggested that David was far from the affluent figure he portrayed. As suspicion around David grew, the investigation took a dramatic turn with the discovery of a letter in Emily's handwriting, found hidden in her suitcase. It was addressed to her parents and hinted at her growing unease about David. She wrote about discovering discrepancies in his stories and financial dealings, expressing fear that she had made a terrible mistake in marrying him. The evidence was mounting, and Detective Hayes felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to come together. But without Emily, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. The detective was determined to uncover the truth, knowing that the facade of the perfect honeymoon was hiding something far more sinister. The financial investigation into David Reynolds' affairs revealed a cascade of deceit. Detective Hayes and his team uncovered a complex network of bank accounts, hidden assets, and dubious transactions. David's financial empire, once thought to be thriving, was crumbling under the weight of risky investments and substantial debts. As Hayes delved deeper, he discovered that David had been involved in several questionable business ventures. One such venture was a failed real estate development in Florida, which had resulted in significant losses for investors. Another was a tech startup that went bankrupt, leaving David with substantial debts. These ventures, combined with his gambling habits, had drained his resources and left him in a precarious financial position. David's secret debts and business failures provided a possible motive for foul play. With Emily's disappearance, questions arose about potential life insurance policies or other financial benefits he might gain. Hayes' team found that David had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emily, raising further suspicions. Testimonies from friends and colleagues about David's character began to form a consistent narrative. They described him as someone who would do anything to maintain his image of success, even if it meant deceiving those closest to him. Emily, it seemed, had been drawn into a web of lies and financial manipulation. The mounting evidence suggested that David's involvement in Emily's disappearance was more than just circumstantial. His financial desperation, coupled with the inconsistencies in his story, pointed to a more sinister motive. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes knew that the key to solving the case lay in uncovering the full extent of David's deceit and the secrets he had worked so hard to conceal. As the investigation deepened, another layer of David Reynolds' double life began to unfold. His extramarital affairs. Detectives uncovered a series of clandestine relationships that painted a picture of a man far different from the devoted husband he appeared to be. David's phone records and emails revealed communications with several women, some of whom he had met through his business dealings, while others were casual encounters. These relationships ranged from fleeting flings to more serious entanglements. Detective Hayes and his team meticulously tracked down and interviewed these women, each conversation revealing more about David's deceptive nature. One of the women, Laura Mitchell, a marketing executive from New York, provided crucial insight. She described her relationship with David as passionate but tumultuous. They had met at a conference a year before his wedding, and their affair continued well into his engagement with Emily. Laura was unaware of David's upcoming marriage until she saw the wedding announcement on social media. Feeling betrayed, she ended their relationship but kept records of their communications, which she willingly shared with the investigators. Another woman, Jessica Evans, a real estate agent from Miami, had a similar story. She and David had met during one of his business trips, and their affair was marked by lavish gifts and extravagant promises. Jessica, too, was in the dark about David's marital status. She described him as attentive and affectionate, but noted his tendency to vanish for days without explanation. The most damning testimony came from Rachel Turner, a colleague from his firm who had been involved with David for nearly 2 years. Rachel's account revealed a pattern of manipulation and deceit. She recounted how David had confided in her about his financial troubles, painting himself as a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Rachel, deeply infatuated with him, had even loaned him money on several occasions, believing his promises to repay her once his investments paid off. These revelations had a profound impact on the case. They not only established a pattern of deceit, but also suggested potential motives for Emily's disappearance. David's affairs indicated a man capable of maintaining multiple lives, each carefully compartmentalized to prevent discovery. His ability to juggle these relationships while hiding his financial troubles from Emily spoke to his skill at deception. Interviews with his past lovers painted a picture of a man driven by a need for validation and material success. They described how David would often speak of his ambitions and dreams, using his charm to elicit sympathy and support. His relationships, both romantic and financial, were tools he used to navigate his increasingly precarious life. The impact of these revelations on the case was significant. They provided a motive for foul play, suggesting that David might have seen Emily as both an obstacle and a solution to his problems. With his financial empire collapsing and his web of lies unraveling, the pressure on David had reached a breaking point. Emily's disappearance and the subsequent focus on David threatened to expose his entire charade. As Detective Hayes pieced together the evidence, it became clear that the investigation was far from straightforward. Each new discovery added complexity to the case, revealing the depths of David's deceit and the lengths he was willing to go to maintain his facade. The true challenge lay in proving his involvement beyond doubt, a task that required uncovering every hidden aspect of his life. Just when Detective Hayes believed he had a clear picture of David Reynolds' involvement in Emily's disappearance, a shocking twist emerged. A mysterious figure, previously unknown to the investigation, came forward with information that turned the case on its head. The figure was a man named Alex Carter, a private investigator from New York. Alex contacted Detective Hayes, claiming to have crucial information about David Reynolds and his activities. Intrigued and cautious, Hayes arranged a meeting. In a dimly lit cafe, Alex revealed his connection to the case. Alex explained that he had been hired by an anonymous client to investigate David Reynolds months before Emily's disappearance. His client had suspected David of financial misconduct and infidelity, and Alex's investigation had uncovered significant evidence of both. He had been tracking David's movements and communications, documenting his secret affairs and shady business dealings. But Alex's most startling revelation was about Emily. According to his findings, Emily had discovered David's infidelity and financial troubles shortly before their wedding. She had confided in a close friend, expressing her doubts and fears about marrying David. This friend, concerned for Emily's safety, had anonymously hired Alex to gather evidence, hoping to give Emily a way out of her situation. Alex provided Detective Hayes with a dossier of his findings, including photographs, financial records, and transcripts of conversations. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a recording of a conversation between David and an unknown associate discussing plans that hinted at foul play. The recording suggested that David had been plotting something sinister, although the details were vague. This new information complicated the case significantly. It introduced the possibility that Emily might have been aware of David's plans and had taken steps to protect herself. Detective Hayes considered the idea that Emily could have staged her disappearance to escape David's clutches, although the lack of concrete evidence made this theory difficult to prove. Hayes decided to re-interview everyone involved, armed with the new information. He spoke again with Emily's family and friends, uncovering more details about her state of mind before the wedding. Emily's best friend, Lisa, revealed that Emily had been increasingly anxious in the weeks leading up to the honeymoon. She had confided in Lisa about her fears and mentioned the anonymous tipster who had warned her about David. David's reaction to the reopened investigation was one of surprise and agitation. He denied any involvement in Emily's disappearance and dismissed the evidence provided by Alex Carter as fabrications. However, his growing frustration and inconsistent statements only added to the suspicion surrounding him. The twist in the case forced Detective Hayes to consider all possibilities. He intensified the search for Emily, exploring the idea that she might have gone into hiding. The investigation expanded to include airports, border crossings, and potential safe houses. The media coverage, once focused solely on David, began to speculate about Emily's fate and her possible role in the unfolding drama. As the investigation continued, Detective Hayes faced mounting pressure to solve the case. The new information from Alex Carter provided valuable leads, but it also complicated the narrative, making it harder to distinguish between victim and perpetrator. Hayes knew that the truth lay somewhere within the tangled web of deceit and betrayal, and he was determined to unravel it. The investigation into Emily Parker's disappearance stretched on for months, with Detective Hayes and his team following every lead, no matter how tenuous. The case had become a national obsession, with the media closely monitoring every development. Public opinion was divided. Some believed David Reynolds was guilty of foul play, while others speculated that Emily had staged her own disappearance to escape a troubled marriage. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A hiker in a remote part of St. Lucia discovered a makeshift campsite hidden in the dense jungle. Among the belongings were items that matched the descriptions of Emily's possessions, including a distinctive bracelet she was known to wear. The discovery reignited the investigation, with search teams scouring the area for further clues. Eventually, they found Emily. She was alive but severely dehydrated and disoriented. Emily had indeed staged her disappearance, driven by fear and desperation, after uncovering David's deceit and feeling trapped in the marriage. She had fled into the jungle, intending to disappear entirely, but the harsh conditions had taken a toll on her health. Emily's rescue brought a mix of relief and outrage. While many were glad she was safe, questions about her actions and the trauma she endured dominated the public discourse. Detective Hayes interviewed Emily extensively, piecing together her story. She described the mounting pressure she felt after discovering David's infidelities and financial troubles. The anonymous tip from Alex Carter had been the final straw, prompting her to take drastic action. David Reynolds was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit harm. The evidence provided by Alex Carter, combined with Emily's testimony, built a strong case against him. During the trial, the full extent of David's deceit was laid bare. His financial empire had been a house of cards, supported by lies and illegal activities. The jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The aftermath of the case left lasting scars on everyone involved. Emily returned to Maplewood, where she began the long process of healing with the support of her family and friends. She became an advocate for domestic abuse victims, sharing her story to help others in similar situations. The media's fascination with her life eventually faded, but Emily remained a symbol of resilience and survival. Detective Hayes reflected on the case as one of the most challenging of his career. It had been a journey through layers of deception and human frailty, revealing the dark complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. The resolution, while not entirely satisfying, brought a measure of justice and closure to those affected. In the end, the case of Emily Parker's disappearance was a stark reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction, and that beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives, there can lie a twisted web of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The Carson family lived in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and an aura of tranquility. Richard Carson, a well-respected accountant, and his wife, Sophia, a beloved elementary school teacher, seemed to embody the perfect American dream. They had 2 children, Anna and Tyler, who were the pride and joy of their parents. One crisp autumn morning, the facade of perfection shattered. Richard Carson returned home from a weekend fishing trip with his friends to find the house eerily silent. The usual warmth and cheer were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. He called out for Sophia but received no response. Anxiety gnawed at him as he climbed the stairs to their bedroom. The sight that greeted him was every husband's nightmare. Sophia lay motionless on the bed, her skin a pale hue that contrasted starkly with the dark dried blood staining the sheets. Richard's heart pounded as he rushed to her side, desperately trying to shake her awake. It was futile. Sophia was gone. Richard's frantic call to 911 brought the police and paramedics rushing to the scene. They confirmed what Richard already knew. Sophia Carson was dead. The initial investigation began, with officers combing through the house for clues. Richard was in shock. barely able to process the questions thrown his way. Detective Sarah McMillan, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for her keen instincts, took charge of the case. She quickly established that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Sophia knew her attacker. As the investigation progressed, Richard's alibi was scrutinized. His fishing buddies corroborated his story, placing him miles away at the time of Sophia's death. The community was in disbelief. The Carsons had always appeared to be the perfect couple, deeply in love and committed to their family. But as the days passed, whispers of Richard's suspected infidelity began to surface. Sophia's best friend Laura mentioned that Sophia had confided in her about her fears that Richard was cheating. This revelation cast a shadow of suspicion over Richard, despite his solid alibi. The media quickly picked up the story, painting a picture of a troubled marriage and a potential crime of passion. The pressure mounted on the police to solve the case, but with Richard's airtight alibi, they were at a loss. It was then that Sophia's sister, Megan, decided to take matters into her own hands. She hired a private investigator, Jake Thompson, to dig deeper into Sophia's suspicions and uncover the truth behind her sister's death. Richard and Sophia Carson's love story began in high school. They were the quintessential sweethearts, inseparable and deeply in love. After graduation, they went to college together, got married, and started a family. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, filled with love, success, and two beautiful children. Richard's career as an accountant flourished, and Sophia found her calling as a teacher. They were well liked in their community, active in local events, and always seen together at neighborhood gatherings. But beneath the surface, Sophia harbored growing suspicions about her husband's fidelity. It started with small things: late nights at the office, unexplained phone calls, and Richard's increasing emotional distance. Sophia confided in her best friend Laura, sharing her fears and doubts. Laura advised her to confront Richard, but Sophia was hesitant. She didn't want to believe that the man she loved could betray her. As months turned into years, Sophia's suspicions deepened. She found herself checking Richard's phone when he wasn't looking, scrutinizing his behavior for any signs of infidelity. Her anxiety grew, casting a shadow over her once happy marriage. She often asked Laura if she was overreacting, but Laura could see the toll it was taking on her friend. One evening, Sophia found a lipstick stain on Richard's collar. It was the final straw. She confronted him, demanding the truth. Richard denied any wrongdoing, insisting that it was a misunderstanding. He claimed he was loyal and devoted, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Their arguments became more frequent and intense. Sophia felt trapped in a web of doubt and mistrust, while Richard grew increasingly frustrated with her accusations. In her darkest moments, Sophia wondered if she was losing her mind. She contemplated hiring a private investigator, but feared what she might discover. Instead, she continued to confide in Laura, who remained her steadfast support. Laura, concerned for her friend's well-being, suggested they document everything. Sophia began keeping a journal, recording every suspicious incident, every fight, and every moment of doubt. She hoped that if the truth ever came out, she would have the evidence to confront Richard once and for all. Sophia's sister, Megan, was also aware of the tensions in the Carson household. She had always been close to Sophia and noticed the changes in her demeanor. Megan urged Sophia to take action, but Sophia remained paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. As the months passed, Sophia's suspicions became an all-consuming obsession. She couldn't escape the nagging feeling that her husband was leading a double life. It was this unrelenting doubt that ultimately led Megan to hire Jake Thompson, determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for her sister. Detective Sarah McMillan's team worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to Sophia Carson's death. They interviewed family, friends, and neighbors, trying to build a profile of Sophia's life and the possible motives for her murder. Richard's cooperation was noted, but his solid alibi kept him out of immediate suspicion. Megan, desperate for answers, turned to private investigator Jake Thompson. Jake was known for his tenacity and skill in uncovering hidden truths. With a career spanning over 2 decades, he had a reputation for solving the most challenging cases. When Megan approached him, he listened intently to her concerns about Richard's infidelity and Sophia's suspicions. Jake agreed to take the case, starting with a thorough review of Sophia's journal. The detailed entries painted a picture of a woman tormented by doubt and fear. Sophia's descriptions of Richard's behavior and her growing anxiety provided Jake with valuable insights into the possible cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage. Jake's first step was to delve into Richard's background. He conducted surveillance, followed Richard to work, and monitored his interactions. Richard appeared to be a devoted father and professional, but Jake knew better than to take things at face value. Interviews with Sophia's friends and colleagues revealed a woman who was deeply loved and respected. They spoke of her kindness, dedication to her students, and the love she had for her family. But they also mentioned the changes they had seen in her over the past few years. Laura, Sophia's best friend, was a crucial source of information. She shared the details of Sophia's fears and the confrontations she had with Richard. Laura also mentioned a woman named Carla Mason, a former colleague of Richard's, who had once been very close to him. Sophia had always been wary of Carla, suspecting her of having an affair with Richard. Jake's investigation led him to Carla Mason. He dug into her background, uncovering a series of troubling details. Carla had a history of unstable relationships and a reputation for being manipulative. She had left the company where she worked with Richard under mysterious circumstances, and Jake's instincts told him there was more to the story. As Jake pieced together the puzzle, he began to see a pattern. Carla's presence in Richard's life, Sophia's escalating suspicions, and the sudden violent end to Sophia's life were all connected. He knew he was onto something significant, but he needed concrete evidence to prove Carla's involvement. Jake intensified his surveillance on Carla, watching her every move. He interviewed her acquaintances, piecing together a profile of a woman driven by jealousy and obsession. It became clear that Carla harbored a deep resentment towards Sophia, viewing her as the obstacle to her happiness with Richard. With the pieces falling into place, Jake prepared to confront Carla, determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for Sophia Carson. Jake Thompson was no stranger to the darker side of human nature. With years of experience as a private investigator, he had seen it all: infidelity, fraud, even murder. But the Carson case had a complexity that intrigued him. As he delved deeper, the tangled web of deceit and betrayal began to unravel. Richard Carson, on the surface, was a model husband and father, but Jake's investigation revealed another side to him. Richard had indeed been unfaithful, and his affair with Carla Mason was more than a fleeting indiscretion. Carla Mason was a striking woman in her early 30s, with a magnetic presence that drew people to her. She had met Richard when they both worked at the same accounting firm. Their affair began innocently enough, with shared lunches and late-night conversations, but it quickly escalated into a passionate and clandestine relationship. Jake's surveillance provided him with the evidence he needed. He captured photos of Richard and Carla meeting in secret, their intimate moments betraying the depth of their connection. But it wasn't just the affair that caught Jake's attention. It was Carla's behavior. She was possessive, obsessive, and clearly driven by a desire to replace Sophia in Richard's life. Jake's investigation into Carla's past revealed a troubled history. She had grown up in a dysfunctional family, with a mother who was emotionally distant and a series of abusive relationships. These experiences had left Carla with deep emotional scars and a desperate need for validation and love. When she met Richard, she saw him as her ticket to a better life, a chance to escape her past and find happiness. But Carla's obsession with Richard took a dark turn when she realized he would never leave Sophia. Despite Richard's promises and assurances, he remained with his wife, further fueling Carla's resentment. She began to see Sophia as the obstacle standing between her and the life she desired. Her jealousy grew, and with it, a dangerous resolve. Jake's breakthrough came when he discovered a series of emails between Carla and Richard. In them, Carla expressed her frustration and anger, accusing Richard of leading her on and demanding that he leave Sophia. Richard's responses were apologetic, but non-committal, indicating his reluctance to abandon his family. One email in particular stood out. It was sent a week before Sophia's death. Carla had written a long emotional message, threatening to expose their affair if Richard didn't take action. She hinted at a plan to remove Sophia from the picture, a chilling foreshadowing of the tragedy that would soon unfold. Armed with this evidence, Jake intensified his efforts to link Carla directly to the crime. He interviewed her former colleagues and friends, uncovering a pattern of manipulative and unstable behavior. They described Carla as someone who would go to great lengths to get what she wanted, often using deceit and emotional manipulation to achieve her goals. One colleague in particular provided a crucial piece of information. He recalled a conversation with Carla where she had fantasized about a life with Richard, free from the constraints of his marriage. She had spoken with a chilling detachment about the possibility of Sophia disappearing, a comment that now took on a sinister significance. Jake knew he was close. He gathered all the evidence he had collected and prepared to confront Carla. He needed her to confess, to break under the weight of the truth. Carla Mason's affair with Richard Carson had started with innocent flirtation and grown into a full-blown obsession. She had fallen hard for Richard, seeing him as her escape from a life of loneliness and pain. But as their relationship deepened, so did her jealousy and desire to replace Sophia Carson. The affair began 3 years prior, at an office holiday party. Richard, charming and attentive, had noticed Carla sitting alone and struck up a conversation. They found common ground in their love for their work and shared frustrations about their personal lives. Richard confided in Carla about his strained marriage, while Carla shared her dreams of finding true love. Their connection was instant and electric. Soon they were meeting for lunches, then dinners, and finally secret rendezvous at hotels. Richard was careful to keep their affair hidden, but Carla's feelings for him grew stronger with each passing day. She fantasized about a future where they could be together openly, free from the constraints of his marriage. Carla's fantasies, however, were marred by the reality of Sophia's existence. Every time Richard went home to his wife, Carla's resentment festered. She started to view Sophia as the obstacle to her happiness, the barrier standing between her and the life she wanted with Richard. Carla's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would call Richard at all hours, demanding to know where he was and who he was with. She became possessive, monitoring his social media and showing up unannounced at his office. Richard, initially flattered by her attention, began to feel trapped by her neediness. The breaking point came when Carla discovered that Richard had lied to her about spending a weekend with Sophia. Enraged, she confronted him, demanding that he choose between her and his wife. Richard, caught off guard by her intensity, tried to calm her down. He promised he would leave Sophia, but deep down he knew he couldn't follow through. As Carla's obsession grew, so did her hatred for Sophia. She started to stalk her, learning her routines and habits. Carla would drive by the Carson house late at night, watching from the shadows as Sophia went about her life. Her anger boiled over as she saw the life she wanted being lived by another woman. Carla's plan to remove Sophia took shape over several months. She began to fantasize about ways to eliminate her rival, her thoughts growing darker and more dangerous. The email she sent to Richard, threatening to expose their affair, was a desperate attempt to force his hand. But when he failed to act, Carla decided to take matters into her own hands. On the night of the murder, Carla waited until she knew Richard was away on his fishing trip. She had meticulously planned every detail, from disabling the security cameras to ensuring she left no trace of her presence. She broke into the Carson house using a spare key Richard had given her, moving silently through the darkened rooms. Sophia was asleep when Carla entered the bedroom. The sight of her rival, peaceful and unaware, fueled Carla's rage. She approached the bed, a knife clutched tightly in her hand. Sophia woke up just as Carla lunged, but it was too late. The attack was swift and brutal, driven by years of pent-up anger and resentment. After the deed was done, Carla stood over Sophia's lifeless body, a mixture of triumph and horror washing over her. She had done it. She had removed the obstacle to her happiness. But as the adrenaline faded, the reality of her actions set in. She quickly wiped down the surfaces she had touched, making sure to leave no evidence behind. Then she slipped out of the house and disappeared into the night. Carla believed she had committed the perfect crime, but Jake Thompson's investigation unraveled her carefully constructed alibi. His surveillance and interviews revealed the depth of her obsession and the length she had gone to in order to be with Richard. The evidence he gathered painted a chilling picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and willing to kill to get what she wanted. As Jake prepared to confront Carla, he knew that her fragile psyche would be her undoing. The weight of her guilt, combined with the mountain of evidence against her, would be too much for her to bear. It was only a matter of time before she broke under the pressure and confessed to her heinous crime. Jake Thompson meticulously gathered the evidence needed to build an airtight case against Carla Mason. He knew that to secure a conviction, every detail had to be scrutinized, and every lead followed. His investigation had revealed Carla's obsessive behavior, her deep-seated resentment towards Sophia, and the lengths she went to in order to be with Richard. Now it was time to piece it all together. Jake's first task was to consolidate the surveillance footage and photographs he had taken of Carla and Richard. The images clearly showed their intimate relationship, disproving any claims that Carla might make about their affair being over. These visual proofs were crucial in establishing Carla's motive. Next, Jake focused on the emails between Carla and Richard. The threatening messages Carla had sent, demanding that Richard leave Sophia or face the consequences, were damning evidence of her intent. Jake printed out the emails, highlighting the passages where Carla hinted at drastic measures if she didn't get her way. Jake also gathered testimonies from Carla's former colleagues and acquaintances. One witness, a close friend of Carla's, reluctantly shared a conversation they had just days before Sophia's murder. Carla had expressed a disturbing desire for Sophia to disappear, even making offhand remarks about how easy it would be to make it happen. This testimony painted a clear picture of Carla's premeditation. The most crucial piece of evidence, however, came from the crime scene itself. Jake had worked closely with Detective Sarah McMillan, sharing his findings and collaborating on the investigation. Forensic analysis revealed traces of Carla's DNA on the knife used to kill Sophia, as well as on the bedroom door handle. Despite her efforts to clean up, Carla had made critical mistakes that tied her directly to the murder. Jake and Sarah also discovered a partial fingerprint on the windowsill where Carla had entered the house. While it wasn't a complete match, it added to the mounting evidence against her. Jake knew that these physical proofs, combined with the digital and testimonial evidence, created a compelling case. With everything in place, Jake turned his attention to Carla's acquaintances. He interviewed neighbors, friends, and even casual acquaintances, piecing together a profile of a woman driven by desperation and jealousy. One neighbor recalled seeing Carla's car parked near the Carson house on several occasions, further corroborating her stalking behavior. The final piece of the puzzle came from a surprising source. Richard, racked with guilt and realizing the extent of Carla's obsession, agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. He provided additional emails and messages from Carla, as well as his own account of their relationship. Richard's testimony was crucial in establishing the timeline and confirming Carla's motives. Jake presented his findings to Detective McMillan, who was impressed by the thoroughness of the investigation. Together, they compiled a detailed report outlining Carla's motives, actions, and the overwhelming evidence against her. The case was ready to go to trial. Carla was arrested at her apartment, her shocked expression revealing her belief that she had gotten away with murder. As the police led her away in handcuffs, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction. He had uncovered the truth and ensured that justice would be served for Sophia Carson. The legal proceedings were swift. Carla's defense tried to argue that she had been framed, but the evidence was irrefutable. The emails, the forensic evidence, and the testimonies painted a clear picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and willing to kill to achieve her desires. In the end, Carla was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Richard's involvement, though not criminal, left a stain on his reputation and devastated his family. The Carson children, Anna and Tyler, faced a future without their mother and with a father whose actions had indirectly led to her death. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, those left behind struggled to find a sense of normalcy. The Carson family's once bright future was now overshadowed by loss and betrayal. Sophia's absence was a constant presence in their lives, a void that could never be filled. Megan, Sophia's sister, took on the role of guardian for Anna and Tyler. She moved into the Carson home, providing stability and support for the children. Megan's bond with her niece and nephew deepened as they navigated their shared grief. Together, they honored Sophia's memory, finding comfort in the love she had given them. Laura, Sophia's best friend, also played a crucial role in helping the family heal. She organized memorial events, celebrating Sophia's life and the impact she had on those around her. The community rallied together, offering support and love to the Carson children, ensuring they knew they were not alone. Richard, burdened by guilt and remorse, sought therapy to confront his actions and the consequences they had wrought. He knew he could never undo the pain he had caused, but he hoped to find a path to redemption. Richard's journey was one of self-reflection and accountability, a long and difficult process of coming to terms with his past. As the years passed, Anna and Tyler grew up, carrying with them the lessons of their mother's life and the strength of their Aunt Megan's love. They pursued their dreams, determined to honor Sophia's memory through their actions and achievements. The scars of their past remained, but they found ways to move forward, holding on to the positive memories of their family. The Carson case, with all its twists and tragedies, became a beacon of resilience for the community. It reminded them of the fragility of life and the strength that could be found in unity and support. John Anderson, a well-respected local businessman, was found dead under mysterious circumstances in his home. The news spread like wildfire, leaving the townspeople in shock and disbelief. John's body was discovered by his wife, Lisa Anderson, who called the police in a state of frantic distress. The scene that awaited the detectives was both perplexing and chilling. John lay motionless in the living room, with no visible signs of struggle or forced entry. The initial examination suggested a sudden and unexplained death, but something felt off to the seasoned investigators. Detective Sarah Miller and her partner, Detective James Carter, were assigned to the case. Both experienced and diligent, they knew that in a small town like Brooksville, everyone had their secrets, and sometimes those secrets could be deadly. As they began their investigation, the townsfolk watched with bated breath, eager to know what had happened to one of their own. Rumors began to swirl as the community speculated about the cause of John's untimely demise. Some whispered about his business dealings, while others hinted at personal troubles. Little did they know that the truth was far more sinister and tangled than they could ever imagine. As the detectives delved deeper into John's life and relationships, they uncovered a web of deceit, betrayal, and hidden motives that pointed to a shocking conclusion. John Anderson was a man of many facets. At 45, he had built a successful career as the owner of a local hardware store, Anderson's Supplies, which had been a staple in Brooksville for over 2 decades. Known for his generosity and commitment to the community, John was a beloved figure in town. He often donated to local charities and sponsored youth sports teams, earning him a reputation as a pillar of Brooksville society. Despite his public persona, those who knew John well were aware of his private struggles. His marriage to Lisa had been under strain for several years. The couple had met in college and married young, but over time the passion had waned, replaced by routine and occasional arguments. Friends described John as hardworking and dedicated, but also as someone who could be distant and absorbed in his work. John's last known activities painted a picture of a man entrenched in his routine. He had spent the previous day at his store, attending to customers and managing inventory. He left work at his usual time, stopped briefly at a local diner for a cup of coffee, and then headed home. Surveillance footage confirmed that he arrived at his house at 6:45 p.m. That evening, John had planned to spend a quiet night with Lisa, watching television and discussing their upcoming vacation. However, Lisa reported that John had complained of feeling unwell shortly after dinner. He had retired to the living room to rest, and that was the last time she saw him alive. When she went to check on him later, she found him unresponsive and called 911. The initial autopsy report was inconclusive. There were no obvious signs of trauma or foul play, and toxicology results were pending. Detectives Miller and Carter knew that they had to dig deeper into John's life to uncover any potential clues that could explain his sudden death. They began by interviewing Lisa and those closest to John, hoping to piece together the events leading up to that fateful night. Lisa Anderson was the picture of grief when the detectives first interviewed her. At 42, she was a striking woman with auburn hair and piercing blue eyes, now red-rimmed from crying. Her distress seemed genuine, but Miller and Carter knew better than to take things at face value. They needed to understand her relationship with John and her potential role in his death. Lisa worked as a marketing manager for a local real estate firm, a job she had taken up after their 2 children, Jake and Emily, went off to college. Described by friends as outgoing and charismatic, Lisa was well liked in the community. However, Some noted that her marriage to John had been rocky. There were rumors of arguments and a growing emotional distance between them. When questioned about the night of John's death, Lisa recounted her version of events with a tremor in her voice. She described how John had complained of feeling ill after dinner and had decided to lie down in the living room. She had given him some space, thinking he needed rest, and had gone upstairs to read. Hours later, when she didn't hear from him, she went downstairs and found him unresponsive. Lisa's reaction to John's death was complex. She expressed deep sorrow and a sense of loss, but also hinted at frustrations that had simmered beneath the surface of their marriage. She admitted that they had been going through a rough patch, but she insisted that she loved John and had hoped to work through their issues. As the detectives delved deeper, they noticed subtle inconsistencies in Lisa's statements. She seemed hesitant when discussing certain aspects of her relationship with John, and there were moments when her grief appeared almost performative. Miller and Carter decided to explore further, focusing on Lisa's personal life and relationships outside her marriage. Their investigation soon led them to Mark Benson, Lisa's co-worker. Initial inquiries revealed that Lisa and Mark had been spending a lot of time together, both in and out of the office. The nature of their relationship raised eyebrows, and the detective suspected that there was more to the story than Lisa had let on. With this new lead, they began to unravel the threads of an affair that would cast a dark shadow over John's death and point to possible motives that were previously unseen. Detectives Miller and Carter arrived at the Anderson residence the morning after John's body was discovered. The house, a modest two-story home on Maple Street, was cordoned off with police tape. Forensic teams were already at work, meticulously combing through every inch of the property for clues. Miller, a seasoned detective with a keen eye for detail, started her examination in the living room where John's body had been found. The room was neat, almost eerily so. John lay on the couch, his face serene as if he were merely asleep. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious wounds or marks on his body. The initial assessment by the medical examiner suggested that John had died of unknown causes, pending a full autopsy. Carter, Miller's partner, was outside speaking with the first responders. A burly man with a no-nonsense attitude, he had a knack for getting people to talk. He gathered statements from the paramedics and the patrol officers who had first arrived at the scene. None of them had seen anything out of the ordinary, and there were no immediate signs of forced entry or foul play. Inside, Miller turned her attention to Lisa, who sat at the kitchen table clutching a tissue. Lisa's hands trembled as she recounted the events of the previous night. Her story was consistent with what she had told the 911 operator. John had felt unwell, and she had left him to rest, only to find him unresponsive later. Miller noted the way Lisa's eyes darted around the room, avoiding direct contact. As they wrapped up their initial interviews, Miller and Carter spoke with several neighbors. Most described the Andersons as a quiet couple who kept to themselves. A few mentioned hearing arguments on occasion, but nothing that had raised significant alarm. One neighbor, Mrs. Evans, an elderly widow who lived next door, recalled seeing John the evening before. He had seemed his usual self, waving as he walked to his front door. Back at the station, the detectives reviewed their notes. They compiled a list of potential witnesses and persons of interest, starting with Lisa and expanding to friends, family, and co-workers. The preliminary evidence didn't point clearly in any direction, but Miller and Carter were determined to leave no stone unturned. Forensic analysis began to yield some results. The autopsy confirmed that John had not suffered from any external injuries. Toxicology tests, however, revealed trace amounts of a foreign substance in his system. This finding raised new questions about whether John's death was natural or if he had been deliberately poisoned. The detectives considered the possibility of an accidental overdose, but decided to focus on investigating any potential foul play. Meanwhile, Miller and Carter continued to scrutinize Lisa's behavior and background. They requested her phone records and financial statements, looking for any anomalies. Lisa's initial shock and sorrow seemed genuine, but the detectives knew that grief could mask many things. They needed to understand her motives, her relationships, and her state of mind in the weeks leading up to John's death. Their investigation soon took a critical turn when they discovered a series of text messages between Lisa and her co-worker, Mark Benson. The messages hinted at a relationship that was far more intimate than just colleagues. This revelation provided a new perspective on the case and prompted the detectives to delve deeper into Lisa's affair with Mark. exploring how it might connect to John's untimely demise. The discovery of Lisa's affair with Mark Benson was a turning point in the investigation. The text messages between them were explicit and left little doubt about the nature of their relationship. Mark, a suave and charming man in his early 40s, worked with Lisa at the real estate firm, and it was clear that their connection went beyond professional boundaries. Detectives Miller and Carter decided to bring Lisa in for a second round of questioning. This time, they confronted her with the evidence of her affair. Lisa initially denied any wrongdoing, but when presented with the text messages, she broke down. Through tears, she admitted to the affair, claiming that it had started several months earlier. She insisted, however, that it had nothing to do with John's death. Lisa explained that she had felt lonely and unappreciated in her marriage. John had become increasingly distant, more focused on his business than on their relationship. She sought comfort and companionship in Mark, who was attentive and understanding. The affair had been an escape, a way for her to feel alive again, but she maintained that she had never wanted any harm to come to John. Miller and Carter knew that affairs could be powerful motivators for murder, but they needed more concrete evidence to link Lisa or Mark to John's death. They decided to bring Mark in for questioning. Mark was cooperative but nervous. He confirmed the affair, describing it as a whirlwind romance that had provided solace to both him and Lisa. He claimed that he had no knowledge of John's death and had been at home on the night it happened, a fact that they would need to verify. As the detectives delved deeper into the affair, they discovered that Lisa and Mark had been planning to start a new life together. Emails and further text messages revealed discussions about leaving Brooksville and moving to a different city. They had even looked into potential properties and job opportunities elsewhere. This painted a picture of a couple desperate to escape their current lives, raising further suspicions about their involvement in John's death. The affair added a layer of complexity to the case. Lisa's motive seemed clear. If she were free from her marriage, she could be with Mark without the stigma of divorce in their conservative community. However, Miller and Carter needed to establish a link between the affair and John's death. They began by re-examining the toxicology report, looking for any substances that could be traced back to Lisa or Mark. The detectives also started to scrutinize Mark's background more closely. They discovered that he had a history of financial troubles and had recently been involved in a legal dispute with a former employer. This revelation suggested that Mark might have had his own motives for wanting John out of the picture, particularly if he believed that Lisa could provide financial stability. With these new leads, Miller and Carter were determined to uncover the truth. They needed to build a case that connected the dots between the affair, the motives, and the opportunity for either Lisa or Mark to have orchestrated John's death. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. But the detectives were resolute in their pursuit of justice. Mark Benson presented himself as a confident and composed individual. But under the scrutiny of the detectives, cracks began to appear in his facade. Mark was a real estate agent who had joined the same firm as Lisa a year prior. At 41, he was known for his charm and persuasive skills, which had earned him a reputation as one of the top agents in Brooksville. However, his personal life was far less stable. During his interview, Mark maintained that his relationship with Lisa was purely about mutual emotional support. He admitted to falling in love with her, but insisted that they had no plans to harm John. He claimed to have been at his apartment on the night of John's death, providing an alibi that the detectives would need to verify. As Miller and Carter dug into Mark's background, they found several red flags. Mark had moved to Brooksville after a series of failed business ventures in larger cities. He had accumulated significant debt and had been sued by a former business partner over a failed investment. Financial records showed that Mark was living beyond his means, struggling to keep up with his debts and maintain his lifestyle. Further investigation into Mark's phone records and emails revealed frequent, secretive communications with Lisa. They often discussed their dissatisfaction with their current lives and fantasized about a future together. In one particularly revealing email, Mark wrote about his desperation to start anew and his frustration with the obstacles in their way. While this was not direct evidence of a murder plot, it added to the narrative that he had a strong motive to eliminate John. The detectives also uncovered that Mark had recently taken out a sizable life insurance policy on himself, naming Lisa as the beneficiary. This discovery was particularly suspicious, suggesting that Mark might have been planning for a future that included financial security, possibly derived from Lisa's newfound widowhood. To verify Mark's alibi, Miller and Carter visited his apartment complex. The building manager confirmed that Mark had been seen entering his apartment around 7 p.m. on the night of John's death, but there were no witnesses to confirm his presence there for the entire evening. This left a window of opportunity that the detectives couldn't ignore. As they continued to interrogate Mark, his story began to show inconsistencies. He stumbled over details about his whereabouts and interactions with Lisa. Miller and Carter pressed harder, using psychological tactics to unsettle him. Mark's composure started to fray, and he became increasingly defensive. In a tense moment during questioning, Mark blurted out that Lisa had been the one to suggest they could be together sooner if John were out of the picture. This accusation shifted the focus back to Lisa and raised questions about who was truly orchestrating the events leading up to John's death. Was Mark trying to deflect blame, or was there a more sinister conspiracy at play? With both Lisa and Mark under intense scrutiny, the detectives faced the challenge of untangling a web of lies, motives, and opportunities. They needed more concrete evidence to determine whether one or both of them were responsible for John's death. As they continued their investigation, they hoped that the next piece of the puzzle would bring them closer to the truth. As the investigation progressed, Miller and Carter encountered numerous twists and turns that complicated the case. New evidence surfaced, leading them down unexpected paths and challenging their initial assumptions. Each revelation brought them closer to the truth, but also raised more questions. One such twist came when the toxicology report was finalized. The foreign substance found in John's system was identified as a rare, fast-acting poison. This poison was not something one could easily acquire, pointing to a premeditated act rather than an accidental overdose. The detectives now had concrete evidence that John's death was a murder, and they needed to find out who had access to such a substance. Their inquiries led them to a local pharmacy where the poison had been purchased. The pharmacist remembered selling the substance to a man matching Mark's description, but there was no solid proof linking Mark directly to the purchase. This added another layer of suspicion, but was not enough to make an arrest. While following up on the lead at the pharmacy, the detectives received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed to have seen Lisa meeting with a man in a secluded park shortly before John's death. This information suggested that Lisa might have been plotting something clandestine, possibly involving Mark. The detectives traced the call, but found that it originated from a disposable phone, making it impossible to identify the source. Simultaneously, a surprising piece of evidence emerged from John's business dealings. Financial records indicated that John had recently transferred a significant sum of money to an unknown account. Further investigation revealed that this account belonged to a private investigator named Alex Thompson. When questioned, Thompson disclosed that John had hired him to follow Lisa, suspecting her of infidelity. This revelation painted a picture of a man who was not only aware of his wife's affair, but also taking steps to gather evidence. The private investigator's report included photos and detailed logs of Lisa's meetings with Mark. These documents confirmed the affair, but also contained troubling information about Lisa's behavior. According to Thompson, Lisa had been acting erratically in recent weeks, frequently discussing her unhappiness and expressing anger towards John. In one recorded conversation, she mentioned feeling trapped and hinted at wanting to escape her marriage by any means necessary. This new evidence prompted Miller and Carter to reevaluate their approach. They decided to conduct a thorough search of the Anderson home, hoping to find something that might link Lisa or Mark directly to the murder. During the search, they discovered a hidden compartment in Lisa's closet, containing vials of the same rare poison found in John's system. This discovery was damning and suggested Lisa's direct involvement in the crime. Confronted with this evidence, Lisa's demeanor shifted. She became defensive and hostile, accusing the detectives of trying to frame her. She insisted that she had no knowledge of the poison and that someone must have planted it to incriminate her. However, just as the detectives felt they were closing in on a resolution, another twist emerged. Mark Benson came forward with new information, claiming that Lisa had manipulated him into helping her acquire the poison. He provided emails and messages in which Lisa discussed her plan to poison John, making it appear as though Mark was a reluctant accomplice rather than the mastermind. With conflicting stories from Lisa and Mark, Miller and Carter faced a complex challenge. They needed to determine who was telling the truth and who was orchestrating a cover-up. The investigation had revealed a tangled web of deceit, motives, and opportunities, but the exact sequence of events leading to John's death remained elusive. Conversely, Mark's narrative painted him as a pawn in Lisa's scheme. He described how Lisa had gradually introduced the idea of poisoning John, making it seem like a desperate measure to free herself from an unbearable situation. He admitted to helping her obtain the poison, but insisted that he had never intended for John to die. His portrayal of Lisa as the mastermind added another layer of complexity to the case. To uncover the truth, the detectives decided to conduct a final round of intense interrogations. They hoped to catch one or both suspects in a lie, or reveal inconsistencies that could break the case wide open. Miller and Carter knew that the key to solving the murder lay in understanding the true nature of the relationship between Lisa and Mark and the depth of their motives. In a tense interview, Lisa finally broke down. She admitted that she had felt trapped in her marriage and saw no way out other than eliminating John. However, she insisted that Mark had been an active participant, encouraging her to go through with the plan. Her confession provided crucial insight into her state of mind and her willingness to commit murder to achieve her goals. With this new information, the detectives turned their attention back to Mark. They confronted him with Lisa's confession, hoping to provoke a reaction. Mark, realizing that his attempts to deflect blame were failing, began to unravel. He confessed to helping Lisa, but maintained that she had manipulated him from the start. The confessions from both suspects provided a clearer picture of the motives and events leading up to John's death. The detectives now had to piece together the final puzzle and determine how to proceed with arrests and charges, ensuring that justice would be served. The breakthrough in the case came when the detectives re-examined the timeline and physical evidence one last time. They discovered a crucial piece of evidence that had initially been overlooked: a security camera from a neighbor's house that captured a portion of the Andersons' backyard. The footage revealed Mark entering the Anderson home on the night of John's death, contradicting his alibi and providing a direct link between him and the crime scene. The jury deliberated for several days before returning a guilty verdict for both Lisa and Mark. Lisa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Mark received a slightly lesser sentence due to his perceived secondary role in the crime. The community of Brooksville was left to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy, but there was a sense of closure as justice had been served. John Harrison, a respected local businessman, was found murdered in his own home. The evidence soon pointed towards his wife, Emily, sparking a scandal that would unravel a complex web of lies, twisted love triangles, deceit, and dark secrets. Emily Harrison, a beautiful woman in her mid-30s, had always been the center of attention. Her previous marriage to Michael Turner had ended amicably, or so it seemed. John, her current husband, had a strained relationship with his younger brother, David. This strained dynamic hid deeper, more sinister connections that would come to light as the investigation unfolded. The murder of John Harrison was not a straightforward case. It was the catalyst that exposed a convoluted love triangle, revealing that everyone involved had motives buried beneath layers of pretense and propriety. Detective Sarah Miller and her partner, Detective Tom Reynolds, would soon find themselves entangled in a case that defied simple explanations. The night of the murder, Emily's scream pierced the quiet neighborhood. The first responders arrived at the Harrison residence to find Emily in a state of hysteria, her clothes stained with blood. John's body lay sprawled on the living room floor, a deep gash across his throat. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the carpet. The scene was chaotic, with furniture overturned and signs of a struggle evident. Officer Daniels, the first on the scene, quickly secured the area. He observed Emily, who was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching a framed photo of her and John. Her hands trembled as she tried to explain what had happened. "I found him like this. I came home and he was just lying there. I didn't know what to do." Her voice was shaky, her eyes wide with terror, but there was something in her demeanor that didn't quite add up. She was too composed, too rehearsed. Detective Miller arrived shortly after, her keen eyes taking in every detail. She noted the absence of forced entry, and the fact that John seemed to have been caught off guard. It suggested that he knew his attacker. Miller's gut instinct told her that this was more than just a burglary gone wrong. As the forensic team began their work, Miller pulled Emily aside for a more detailed statement. Emily recounted her day, carefully avoiding eye contact. She claimed to have been out shopping and returned to find John dead. But there were inconsistencies in her story, small details that didn't align. Detective Reynolds joined Miller, his expression grim. He had spoken with the neighbors, who reported hearing raised voices earlier in the evening. None could identify the second voice, but it was clear that John had not been alone before his death. Miller looked at Reynolds. "This isn't a simple case, Tom. There's more to this than meets the eye." Reynolds nodded in agreement. "Let's dig deeper. Something tells me we're only scratching the surface." The investigation into John Harrison's murder kicked off in earnest the following day. Detectives Miller and Reynolds began their meticulous process of gathering evidence and conducting interviews. The first step was to build a timeline of John's final hours. They discovered that John had left his office around 5 p.m., a bit earlier than usual. His assistant mentioned that he seemed preoccupied, almost distracted. Emily's account placed her at the local mall during this time, but there were no security camera records to confirm her presence. Detective Miller focused on Emily's behavior. She seemed cooperative, yet there was an underlying current of tension. During questioning, Emily maintained her story but frequently glanced at her phone as if expecting a message or call. Miller made a mental note to check her phone records. Meanwhile, Reynolds delved into John's professional life. As a successful real estate developer, John had made a few enemies. Business rivals and disgruntled former employees formed a list of potential suspects. However, none seemed to have a motive strong enough for murder. As they dug deeper, the detectives learned more about Emily's past. Her previous marriage to Michael Turner had ended 5 years ago. The divorce was amicable on paper, but whispers of infidelity and financial disputes lingered. Michael had moved out of town but returned occasionally, supposedly to visit his daughter from another relationship. Detective Miller decided to pay Michael a visit. He lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Michael was a tall, brooding man with a rugged charm. He appeared genuinely shocked when Miller informed him of John's murder. "Emily called me last night," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "She was hysterical, said John was dead. I told her to call the police and then I rushed over. But by the time I got there, the place was crawling with cops. Michael's alibi was shaky, but there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime." Miller noted his reaction and decided to keep him under surveillance. Back at the station, Reynolds had uncovered a new lead. David Harrison, John's younger brother, had been seen arguing with John several days before the murder. David, a charming but aimless man, had always lived in his brother's shadow. He harbored a deep resentment towards John, fueled by jealousy and financial dependence. David was brought in for questioning. He was visibly nervous, his eyes darting around the room as he spoke. "John and I argued about money," he admitted. "He was going to cut me off, but I didn't kill him." The detectives were skeptical. David's alibi for the night of the murder was weak. He claimed to have been at a bar, but no one could confirm his presence. As they continued to press him, David's story began to unravel. Emily's suspicious behavior, Michael's shaky alibi, and David's deep-seated resentment formed a tangled web. The detectives realized they were dealing with more than just a crime of passion. There were layers of deceit and hidden motives that needed to be peeled back, one by one. John and Emily Harrison appeared to be the quintessential suburban couple. They had a beautiful home, a successful business, and were well-liked in their community. But beneath the veneer of their perfect life, cracks were beginning to show. John had built his real estate empire from the ground up. He was known for his business acumen and ruthless negotiating tactics. However, his professional success came at a personal cost. John's demanding work schedule left little time for his marriage, creating a rift between him and Emily. Emily, on the other hand, had a more complex past. Raised in a wealthy family, she was accustomed to a life of privilege. Her first marriage to Michael Turner had been a whirlwind romance. Michael was a charismatic entrepreneur, but his business ventures often ended in failure. Their relationship was passionate but tumultuous, marked by frequent arguments and infidelity. The divorce had been bitter, with Emily accusing Michael of cheating and financial mismanagement. Michael, in turn, claimed that Emily's spending habits had driven him to the brink of bankruptcy. Despite the acrimony, They managed to part ways without too much public scandal. Michael left town, but he never completely severed ties with Emily. John entered Emily's life shortly after her divorce. He offered stability and security, something she desperately needed. Their courtship was swift, and they married within a year. However, the transition from a tumultuous relationship to a stable one was not easy for Emily. She missed the excitement and unpredictability that Michael had brought into her life. David Harrison, John's younger brother, was another significant figure in the unfolding drama. David had always been the black sheep of the family. He struggled with various addictions and had a string of failed business ventures. John often bailed him out, creating a sense of dependency and resentment. David's relationship with Emily was complex. They had an undeniable chemistry, and their interactions were often charged with unspoken tension. Emily confided in David about her marital problems, and he, in turn, found solace in her company. It was clear to the detectives that there was more to their relationship than met the eye. As Miller and Reynolds dug deeper, they discovered that John had recently made some significant financial moves. He had taken out a large life insurance policy and transferred substantial assets into Emily's name. These actions suggested that John was either planning for the future or anticipating something dire. Emily's spending habits had also come under scrutiny. Despite her outward appearance of concern and grief, her bank records revealed large withdrawals and unexplained expenses. The detectives began to suspect that she might have been planning to leave John and start a new life elsewhere. Michael Turner, though seemingly out of the picture, still harbored feelings for Emily. He had recently come back into town and had been seen meeting with her on several occasions. Their interactions were friendly on the surface, but there was an undercurrent of unresolved tension and unspoken words. The background checks painted a picture of a marriage on the brink, with each character hiding their true intentions behind a facade of normalcy. John was the pillar of the community, Emily the perfect wife, David the troubled brother, and Michael the ex-husband with lingering feelings. But as the detectives would soon discover, appearances could be deceiving. As the investigation progressed, the detectives focused on uncovering the motives behind John Harrison's murder. Each of the main players had reasons, both hidden and overt, that could drive them to such an extreme act. Emily's financial troubles were the most glaring. Despite John's success, their finances were strained. Emily's lavish lifestyle had put them in significant debt. The large life insurance policy John had recently taken out added a sinister layer to this financial stress. If Emily were to benefit from John's death, it would solve all her money problems. Emily's affair with David complicated matters further. Their relationship was more than just a fleeting romance. It was a deeply emotional bond, forged out of mutual dissatisfaction and dependency. Michael Turner also had a motive. His lingering feelings for Emily and the unresolved bitterness from their divorce created a volatile mix. Michael's financial instability made him susceptible to desperate measures. His frequent visits to Emily hinted at a rekindled relationship, which could have easily turned into a conspiracy against John. David's resentment towards his brother was well documented. He had lived in John's shadow for most of his life, relying on him for financial support. The argument they had days before the murder centered on money and control. John had threatened to cut David off, a move that would leave him destitute. David's dependence on John created a deep-seated hatred that could have driven him to murder. The detectives also considered the possibility of a joint effort between Emily and David. Their affair, coupled with their financial motives, made them prime suspects. If they conspired together, they could both benefit immensely from John's death. Emily would gain financial freedom, and David would rid himself of his brother's dominance. One evening, Detective Miller received a call from a local bartender who claimed to have seen Emily and David together on the night of the murder. According to the bartender, they appeared to be in an intense conversation, their body language suggesting more than just a casual encounter. This new information put both Emily and David at the scene of the crime around the estimated time of death. Miller and Reynolds brought Emily in for further questioning. Confronted with the bartender's testimony, Emily's composure began to crack. She admitted to meeting David, but insisted they were discussing her troubled marriage and had nothing to do with John's death. David, on the other hand, was less forthcoming. When questioned about his whereabouts, he became defensive and evasive. His alibi, which had already been weak, now seemed even more questionable. The detectives pressed him on his relationship with Emily and the nature of their conversation that night, But David stuck to his story of innocence. Michael Turner also remained a person of interest. His frequent visits to Emily, coupled with his financial troubles, made him a viable suspect. In the midst of these revelations, the detectives encountered several red herrings. One such distraction came in the form of an anonymous tip, suggesting that John was involved in illegal activities. The tip claimed that John had been laundering money through his real estate business. While this lead initially seemed promising, further investigation revealed it to be unfounded. It appeared to be a deliberate attempt to divert the detectives' attention from the true motives behind the murder. Another false lead came from a disgruntled former employee of John's. The employee had a history of making threats against John and had been fired under contentious circumstances. However, after a thorough investigation, it became clear that he had no involvement in the murder. His threats were merely empty words born out of frustration and resentment. The turning point came when Detective Reynolds discovered a series of text messages between Emily and Michael. The messages revealed a rekindling of their romantic relationship and discussed plans to meet secretly. One message in particular stood out. Sent on the day of the murder, it read, "We need to act tonight. John can't find out." Armed with this new evidence, Miller and Reynolds confronted Emily and Michael separately. Emily broke down under the pressure, partially confessing to the affair but denying any involvement in the murder. Michael, however, maintained his innocence, insisting that the messages were taken out of context. The breakthrough in the case came when Detective Miller decided to take a closer look at the phone records and financial transactions. She believed that these would provide the concrete evidence needed to tie the suspects to the crime. The phone records revealed a flurry of calls and messages between Emily, David, and Michael in the days leading up to the murder. The communication pattern suggested a coordinated effort, with Emily at the center. On the night of the murder, there were several calls between Emily and David, as well as a brief call to Michael. This triangulation of communication placed all three suspects in contact during the critical hours. Miller also discovered an unusual transaction in Emily's bank account. A large sum of money had been transferred to an offshore account just days before John's death. This transaction, combined with the life insurance policy, suggested that Emily was preparing for a significant change in her financial situation. Armed with this new evidence, the detectives decided to confront Emily once more. This time they presented her with the phone records and the financial transactions. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Emily's facade of innocence began to crumble. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. "I didn't want it to come to this. I just wanted out. John was controlling, suffocating. I needed a way out, but I never wanted him dead." Miller pressed further. "Who did you talk to that night, Emily? Why were you and David in contact so frequently?" Emily hesitated, her eyes welling with tears. "David and I, we had a plan. We were going to leave John, start fresh, but I swear we never planned to kill him." The detectives knew they needed to hear David's side of the story. When they brought him in for questioning, David initially denied any involvement, but when confronted with the phone records and Emily's partial confession, his resolve weakened. David admitted to meeting Emily on the night of the murder, but claimed that their plan was only to confront John, not to harm him. Emily had convinced him that John would never let her go, and that they needed to make him understand that their relationship was over. Michael's involvement became clearer as the detectives reviewed his financial records. They discovered that he had received a substantial sum of money from an unknown source shortly after John's death. This payment, coupled with the text messages, suggested that Michael was part of the conspiracy. The detectives decided to bring all three suspects in together. In a tense confrontation, they laid out the evidence. Emily's breakdown, David's nervousness, and Michael's defiance created a volatile atmosphere. Miller addressed them. "We know about the affair. We know about the money. It's time to come clean. Who killed John?" Emily, tears streaming down her face, finally confessed. "It was an accident. We confronted John, things got heated, and David lost control. He didn't mean to kill him." David's face paled as he stammered, "It was self-defense. John attacked me and I just reacted. I didn't mean for it to end this way." Michael, realizing the gravity of the situation, added, "I was supposed to help them disappear after. I never thought it would go this far." The detectives had the pieces they needed. The confrontation had turned violent, leading to John's accidental death. Emily and David had panicked, and Michael had stepped in to help cover it up. The murder was a tragic result of a plan gone horribly wrong. With the confessions in hand, the detectives knew they had uncovered the truth. The case was far from simple, but the tangled motives and relationships had finally come to light. The truth was a web of love, betrayal, and desperation. The final confrontation with Emily, David, and Michael marked the culmination of weeks of intense investigation. Detectives Miller and Reynolds had pieced together the intricate puzzle of John Harrison's murder. The courtroom was packed as the trial of Emily, David, and Michael began. The community of Willow Creek, once known for its tranquility, was now a hub of media attention. Reporters and spectators alike were eager to hear the sordid details of the case that had shocked the town. The prosecution laid out a compelling narrative. They described how Emily's affair with David had rekindled old passions, and how their relationship had become a desperate escape from her controlling marriage. The prosecution argued that the financial troubles and the life insurance policy created a powerful motive for murder. Emily's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of circumstances, a woman trapped in a loveless marriage who made poor decisions in a moment of panic. They emphasized that the murder was unplanned and that Emily had no intention of killing her husband. David's defense focused on self-defense. They highlighted John's aggressive behavior and his attack on David, arguing that David had acted out of fear for his life. They portrayed him as a man pushed to his breaking point by years of familial tension and resentment. Michael's defense was the most straightforward. They claimed he had no prior knowledge of the murder plan and that his involvement was limited to helping Emily out of misguided loyalty. He was depicted as an unwitting accomplice, caught up in a situation beyond his control. Throughout the trial, the detectives' meticulous work came to light. The phone records, financial transactions, and confessions all painted a vivid picture of the events leading up to John's death. The jury listened intently as the prosecution and defense presented their cases. On the stand, Emily was a picture of remorse. She recounted the night of the murder in vivid detail, her voice breaking as she described the confrontation with John. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke of her regret and fear. "I loved John," she said, her voice trembling, "but I felt trapped. When David and I confronted him, everything spiraled out of control. I never wanted this to happen." David's testimony was equally emotional. He described the years of living in John's shadow, the constant feeling of inadequacy, and the moment of terror when John attacked him. "I just wanted to protect myself," he said, his voice cracking. "I never meant to kill him. It was an accident." Michael, in his testimony, admitted to helping Emily cover up the murder, but insisted he had no part in the actual killing. "I made a terrible mistake," he said. "I thought I was helping a friend, but I realize now how wrong I was." The prosecution's closing argument was powerful. They emphasized the premeditation involved in the affair and the financial motives. They argued that while the murder might not have been meticulously planned, it was the result of a series of deliberate actions taken by Emily and David. The defense's closing arguments focused on the emotional and psychological aspects of the case. They pleaded for leniency, highlighting the lack of premeditation and the complex web of emotions that led to the tragic event. After several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Emily and David were found guilty of second-degree murder, acknowledging the crime's emotional context, but also the gravity of their actions. Michael was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact, his role in the cover-up undeniable, but his involvement in the murder itself less clear. As the verdicts were read, the courtroom was silent. Emily Harrison was sentenced to 20 years in prison. David Harrison received a 15-year sentence. Michael Turner, though less directly involved, was sentenced to 5 years for his role in the cover-up. The twisted love triangle that led to John Harrison's murder had unraveled, but its impact would be felt for years to come. The truth, once uncovered, had brought justice, but it had also revealed the depths of human frailty and the devastating consequences of unchecked desires. The quiet town of Greenfield was shaken to its core when the body of Jack Thompson was discovered in his modest home on the outskirts of town. Jack, a well-liked middle-aged man known for his generosity and calm demeanor, had recently gone through a tumultuous divorce from his wife, Layla. The divorce, finalized just months prior, had left Jack visibly strained, but no one could have anticipated the tragic end he would meet. Layla Thompson, once the high school sweetheart and longtime partner of Jack, had quickly moved on after their split. She found solace in Derek Stone, a charismatic yet troubled man with a shadowy past. Derek, a former convict with a history of violent offenses, had swept Layla off her feet, bringing a sense of danger and excitement into her life that she had never experienced before. The discovery of Jack's lifeless body under suspicious circumstances set off a whirlwind investigation that uncovered a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and revenge. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek became the focal point of the investigation, revealing dark secrets and motives that lay hidden beneath the surface. Greenfield's local police force, led by Detective Sarah Lawson, was tasked with untangling the complex relationships and finding the truth behind Jack's untimely death. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was not just a simple case of a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned act of vengeance. In the weeks that followed, the town would witness shocking revelations and unexpected twists, as the true nature of the relationships between Jack, Layla, and Derek came to light. The line between victim and perpetrator blurred, leaving everyone to wonder who could be trusted and who was hiding the darkest secrets. Jack and Layla Thompson's marriage had once been the epitome of stability and love. They had met in high school, their romance blossoming over the years into a marriage that seemed unbreakable. Jack, a kind-hearted man with a steady job as a schoolteacher, had always been the rock in their relationship. Layla, a nurse at the local hospital, complemented his steadiness with her nurturing and compassionate nature. However, as the years passed, the spark in their relationship began to fade. The stresses of daily life, combined with their inability to have children, placed a strain on their marriage. Layla's desire for excitement and change grew, leading her to seek solace outside their relationship. This quest for something new ultimately led her to Derek Stone. Derek Stone was a man with a troubled past. He had spent several years in prison for armed robbery and assault, but upon his release, he had vowed to turn his life around. His rugged good looks and charm quickly won Layla over, offering her the thrill and unpredictability she craved. Derek's presence in her life provided a stark contrast to the stability she had known with Jack. The affair between Layla and Derek was passionate and intense, leading to the eventual breakdown of her marriage to Jack. The divorce was bitter, with accusations and recriminations flying from both sides. Jack was devastated, unable to comprehend how the woman he had loved for so long could betray him in such a manner. Layla, on the other hand, felt liberated, ready to start a new chapter with Derek. Despite his attempts to move on, Jack found it difficult to let go of the past. He remained deeply in love with Layla, his heart aching at the thought of her with another man. His friends and colleagues noticed the change in him, his once cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet sadness. Jack's attempts to rekindle his relationship with Layla were met with hostility, further deepening his despair. Derek, meanwhile, harbored his own grudges. He resented Jack for the hold he still seemed to have over Layla, and his violent tendencies began to resurface. Derek's jealousy and possessiveness became more pronounced, leading to frequent arguments with Layla. Despite this, Layla remained committed to Derek, convinced that their love was worth the turmoil. As the months passed, the tension between Jack, Layla, and Derek grew, setting the stage for the tragic events that were about to unfold. The love triangle, fraught with jealousy and resentment, would soon explode in a manner that would shock the entire town of Greenfield and leave a trail of devastation in its wake. The crisp autumn morning was shattered by the piercing scream of Mrs. Henderson, Jack's elderly neighbor, as she discovered his lifeless body sprawled across the living room floor. She had come over to check on Jack after noticing that his mail had piled up over the past few days. Her concern quickly turned to horror as she stumbled upon the gruesome scene. The local police were called immediately, and within minutes Detective Sarah Lawson and her team arrived at the scene. The sight that greeted them was both disturbing and puzzling. Jack's body lay in a pool of blood, his face contorted in a grimace of pain. There were signs of a violent struggle, with furniture overturned and broken glass scattered across the floor. As the forensic team began their meticulous work, Detective Lawson interviewed Mrs. Henderson. The elderly woman, still visibly shaken, recounted her discovery and her interactions with Jack in the days leading up to his death. She mentioned hearing raised voices coming from Jack's house a few nights before, but she had assumed it was just another argument between him and Layla. Layla and Derek were quickly brought in for questioning. Layla appeared distraught, her eyes red from crying. Derek, on the other hand, was stoic, his expression unreadable. Detective Lawson noted the stark contrast between the two, her instincts telling her that there was more to their story than met the eye. Layla recounted her last interaction with Jack. She claimed that she had not seen him for several days, and that their last conversation had been about finalizing the sale of their former home. Derek corroborated Layla's account, stating that they had spent the night of Jack's death at his apartment, miles away from the crime scene. Despite their alibis, Detective Lawson couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She ordered a thorough search of Derek's apartment and began to dig deeper into his past. The initial results of the forensic analysis pointed towards a struggle, with Jack having put up a significant fight against his attacker. There were signs of blunt force trauma to his head, suggesting that he had been struck multiple times with a heavy object. The discovery of a bloodied baseball bat in Jack's garage further complicated the investigation. The bat had Jack's fingerprints on it, but there were also smudges that suggested someone else had handled it. Detective Lawson sent the bat to the lab for further analysis, hoping it would provide a crucial lead. The townspeople of Greenfield were abuzz with speculation. Theories ranged from a robbery gone wrong to a crime of passion. Jack's friends and colleagues were interviewed, painting a picture of a man who was deeply troubled but not without enemies. Layla and Derek's tumultuous relationship became a focal point of the investigation, with many suspecting that their involvement went beyond just an affair. Detective Lawson knew that unraveling the truth behind Jack's death would require piecing together the fragmented lives of the people involved. The love triangle between Jack, Layla, and Derek was fraught with complexities, and she was determined to uncover every hidden detail, no matter how dark or disturbing. The investigation into Jack Thompson's murder began in earnest, with Detective Sarah Lawson leading the charge. Her first step was to establish a timeline of events leading up to Jack's death. She and her team interviewed neighbors, friends, and family, piecing together the last known movements of Jack, Layla, and Derek. The neighbors provided a wealth of information. Several had heard loud arguments coming from Jack's house in the days before his death. One neighbor, Mr. Parker, reported seeing a shadowy figure lurking around Jack's property late at night, although he couldn't provide a clear description. Another neighbor, Mrs. Green, mentioned seeing Layla leave Jack's house in a hurry the day before his body was found. Detective Lawson interviewed Layla's colleagues at the hospital, who described her as a dedicated nurse, but noted that she had become increasingly distracted and agitated in recent months. One colleague, Susan, recalled Layla confiding in her about the stress of her divorce and her volatile relationship with Derek. Susan mentioned that Layla had expressed fear for her safety on several occasions, hinting at Derek's violent tendencies. The investigation also delved into Derek's background. Detective Lawson discovered that Derek had a history of violence and had been in and out of prison for various offenses, including assault and armed robbery. She interviewed some of Derek's former associates, who painted a picture of a man prone to explosive outbursts and a deep-seated need for control. One former associate, Mike, mentioned that Derek had often talked about exacting revenge on anyone who wronged him. Despite Derek's troubling past, his alibi for the night of Jack's murder seemed solid. However, Detective Lawson couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that suggested he had a motive for wanting Jack out of the picture. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes, found during the search of his apartment, further fueled her suspicions. Layla's inconsistent statements also raised red flags. During her initial interview, she had claimed not to have seen Jack for days. However, Mrs. Green's account contradicted this, placing Layla at Jack's house the day before his death. When confronted with this discrepancy, Layla became defensive, insisting that she had only gone to collect some personal belongings and had left after a brief argument. As the investigation progressed, Detective Lawson uncovered a series of text messages between Layla and Derek that suggested they had discussed plans to confront Jack about his continued interference in their relationship. The messages hinted at a growing frustration with Jack and a desire to put an end to the constant conflict. Despite the mounting evidence, the case was far from straightforward. Detective Lawson knew that she needed more concrete proof to build a solid case against Derek and Layla. She ordered a thorough analysis of the crime scene, hoping to find forensic evidence that would link them directly to Jack's murder. The community of Greenfield watched anxiously as the investigation unfolded. The once quiet town was now the center of a media frenzy, with reporters flocking to cover the sensational story. The pressure on Detective Lawson and her team was immense, but she remained steadfast in her determination to uncover the truth and bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder deepened, suspicions surrounding Layla and Derek grew more pronounced. Detective Lawson and her team scrutinized every detail, piecing together the puzzle that seemed to implicate both Layla and Derek in Jack's death. Layla's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her initial grief gave way to a defensive and hostile attitude during subsequent interviews. When questioned about her presence at Jack's house, she provided conflicting accounts, further muddying the waters. Her colleagues at the hospital noted her frequent absences and whispered conversations on her phone, fueling speculation about her involvement in something sinister. Detective Lawson also focused on Derek's suspicious behavior. Despite his alibi, there were inconsistencies that couldn't be ignored. Derek had claimed to be at his apartment on the night of the murder, but surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed his car on the road during the time frame in question. The footage, though grainy, provided enough evidence to warrant further investigation. The discovery of Jack's blood on Derek's shoes was a significant breakthrough. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood matched Jack's, placing Derek at the crime scene. When confronted with this evidence, Derek's composure cracked. He denied any involvement, claiming that he had been framed, but his increasingly erratic behavior only deepened Detective Lawson's suspicions. Layla's phone records revealed a series of heated exchanges between her and Derek in the days leading up to Jack's murder. The messages hinted at a plan to confront Jack and put an end to the constant turmoil he was causing in their lives. The tone of the messages grew more aggressive, with Derek urging Layla to take decisive action. One particular message stood out. Derek had texted Layla the night before the murder, saying, "It's time we take care of this once and for all." Layla's response was cryptic, but seemed to indicate her agreement. The messages provided a chilling glimpse into the escalating tension between the three individuals. Detective Lawson's team also uncovered financial records that revealed Layla had recently taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Jack. The policy, worth a significant amount, named Layla as the sole beneficiary. The timing of the policy raised eyebrows, suggesting a possible financial motive for Jack's murder. As the evidence mounted, Detective Lawson knew she needed a confession to solidify the case. She decided to apply pressure on Layla, hoping to exploit the cracks in her story. During a tense interrogation, Layla finally broke down. She admitted to visiting Jack's house the day before his death, but insisted that she had left before anything happened. She claimed that Derek had become increasingly unhinged, pressuring her to cut all ties with Jack. Detective Lawson also interviewed Derek's former associates again, this time focusing on his violent tendencies and potential motive. Mike, the former associate who had mentioned Derek's penchant for revenge, revealed that Derek had often spoken about wanting to eliminate anyone who threatened his relationship with Layla. Despite the mounting evidence against Derek, the investigation faced a critical juncture. Detective Lawson needed concrete proof to link Derek directly to the crime. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover the final piece of the puzzle that would bring justice to Jack Thompson. As the investigation into Jack Thompson's murder continued, Detective Sarah Lawson delved deeper into Derek Stone's past. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear that Derek was a man with a history of violence and a potential for revenge. Derek's criminal record revealed a series of offenses dating back to his teenage years. He had been involved in gang activities, petty thefts, and assaults. His most serious conviction, however, was for armed robbery, which had landed him in prison for several years. During his incarceration, Derek had been involved in multiple altercations with other inmates, further highlighting his violent tendencies. Detective Lawson interviewed some of Derek's former associates, hoping to gain insight into his behavior and motives. Mike, the associate who had previously hinted at Derek's vengeful nature, provided a chilling account of Derek's time in prison. According to Mike, Derek had developed a reputation for being ruthless and unforgiving, often targeting those who crossed him or posed a threat. One former associate, Steve, recounted a particularly disturbing incident. Derek had been involved in a violent altercation with another inmate who had insulted him. The fight had left the inmate severely injured, and Derek had shown no remorse. Steve described Derek as a man who thrived on control and power, traits that had only intensified during his time behind bars. Detective Lawson also discovered that Derek had a history of unstable relationships. His ex-girlfriend, Lisa, came forward with her own harrowing account of their time together. Lisa described Derek as charming and attentive at first, but his demeanor quickly changed. He became possessive and abusive, isolating her from friends and family. She eventually managed to escape the relationship, but remained fearful of Derek's potential for violence. Lisa's account provided further insight into Derek's character. She mentioned that Derek had often spoken about his desire for revenge against anyone who wronged him. He harbored deep-seated grudges and was willing to go to great lengths to settle scores. Detective Lawson realized that Derek's relationship with Layla and his resentment towards Jack fit this pattern perfectly. Armed with this new information, Detective Lawson intensified her efforts to find concrete evidence linking Derek to Jack's murder. She ordered a comprehensive search of Derek's apartment, hoping to uncover any items that could connect him to the crime scene. The search yielded several pieces of potential evidence, including a set of keys that matched the locks on Jack's house and a blood-stained shirt hidden in the back of Derek's closet. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood on the shirt matched Jack's, providing a direct link between Derek and the crime. This discovery was a significant breakthrough, but Detective Lawson knew that it was not enough on its own to secure a conviction. She needed a confession or additional evidence to solidify the case. Detective Lawson decided to confront Derek with the new evidence, hoping to elicit a reaction. During the interrogation, Derek's composure began to crack. He vehemently denied any involvement, but his increasingly erratic behavior suggested otherwise. Layla, who had been brought in for questioning once again, appeared visibly shaken when confronted with the evidence against Derek. In a desperate bid to save herself, Layla began to distance herself from Derek. She claimed that he had manipulated her and that she had been too afraid to leave him. Layla's statements, while self-serving, provided further insight into the toxic and volatile nature of their relationship. Detective Lawson knew she was close to unraveling the truth, but she needed one final push to bring the case to its conclusion. As the investigation reached its critical juncture, new evidence and unexpected revelations added further complexity to the case. Detective Sarah Lawson and her team were determined to untangle the web of deceit that surrounded Jack Thompson's murder. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from an unexpected source. A former inmate who had shared a cell with Derek, named Tony, came forward with crucial information. Tony revealed that Derek had confided in him about his plan to get rid of Jack. According to Tony, Derek had expressed his frustration with Jack's continued presence in Layla's life and had boasted about his intention to eliminate the problem once and for all. Tony's account added weight to the theory that Derek had premeditated the murder. He provided specific details that matched the evidence found at the crime scene, including the use of the baseball bat as the murder weapon. Tony's testimony was a game-changer, providing the corroboration Detective Lawson needed to build a solid case against Derek. However, the investigation took an unexpected turn when Layla's secret was uncovered. Detective Lawson's team discovered a series of hidden bank accounts in Layla's name, containing large sums of money that she had been siphoning off over the past few years. This revelation raised questions about Layla's true motives and her potential involvement in the murder. Layla's financial records revealed that she had been planning to leave Derek and start a new life. She had been saving money in secret, waiting for the right moment to make her escape. This newfound information painted a different picture of Layla, suggesting that she might have had her own reasons for wanting Jack out of the way. Detective Lawson confronted Layla with the evidence of the hidden bank accounts. Layla broke down, admitting that she had been trapped in a toxic and abusive relationship with Derek. She confessed that she had feared for her life and had been planning to escape, but insisted that she had no involvement in Jack's murder. Layla claimed that Derek had acted alone, driven by his own jealous rage. As the investigation unfolded, another twist emerged. A third party, previously unknown to the investigators, was discovered to have had contact with both Layla and Derek. This individual, named Ryan, was a former colleague of Derek's from his criminal days. Ryan had recently been released from prison and had reconnected with Derek. Detective Lawson brought Ryan in for questioning, hoping to uncover his role in the case. Ryan admitted to meeting with Derek and Layla on several occasions, but denied any involvement in the murder. However, his statements were inconsistent, and his nervous demeanor suggested that he was hiding something. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Ryan's fingerprints were found on the baseball bat used to kill Jack. Under intense interrogation, Ryan finally cracked. He confessed that Derek had enlisted his help in carrying out the murder, promising him a share of the life insurance money that Layla had taken out on Jack. Ryan revealed that Derek had planned every detail, from the initial confrontation to the disposal of evidence. Ryan's confession provided the missing piece of the puzzle, implicating both Derek and himself in the murder. Layla's role remained murky, but the evidence suggested that she had been a pawn in Derek's twisted game. Detective Lawson knew that the case was far from straightforward, but she was determined to bring those responsible to justice. With Ryan's confession in hand, Detective Sarah Lawson prepared for the final confrontation. She knew that Derek Stone would not go down without a fight, and she braced herself for a tense and potentially dangerous encounter. Detective Lawson and her team planned a coordinated effort to arrest Derek. They decided to approach him at his apartment, where he had been staying with Layla. The element of surprise was crucial, as they anticipated that Derek might attempt to flee or react violently. On the day of the operation, the team moved swiftly and efficiently. Detective Lawson knocked on Derek's door, her heart pounding with anticipation. Derek answered, his expression a mix of surprise and defiance. Detective Lawson presented the evidence and Ryan's confession, informing Derek that he was under arrest for the murder of Jack Thompson. Derek's reaction was immediate and explosive. He lunged at Detective Lawson, shouting accusations and threats. The officers quickly subdued him, but not before Derek managed to land a few blows. His resistance only served to reinforce the image of a violent and unstable individual, further sealing his fate. As Derek was taken into custody, Layla was brought in for questioning once again. The revelation of Ryan's involvement had shaken her, and she seemed genuinely terrified of Derek. Layla insisted that she had been unaware of the full extent of Derek's plan, and that she had never intended for Jack to be harmed. Despite Layla's claims, the evidence suggested that she had at least some knowledge of Derek's intentions. Detective Lawson pressed her for details, hoping to unravel the final threads of the case. Under intense questioning, Layla admitted that she had suspected Derek was planning something, but had been too afraid to confront him. The climax of the investigation came when Derek, now facing the reality of his situation, decided to cut a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to provide a full confession and implicate Layla in the planning of the murder. Derek's confession was chilling, detailing the calculated and cold-blooded manner in which he had orchestrated Jack's death. Derek revealed that he had manipulated Layla into taking out the life insurance policy on Jack, promising her a future free from financial worries. He had then enlisted Ryan's help, using his former associate's desperation and loyalty to carry out the crime. Derek admitted that he had been driven by jealousy and a desire for control, unable to tolerate Jack's continued presence in Layla's life. Layla, confronted with Derek's confession, broke down completely. She admitted to her role in the plan, though she maintained that she had never intended for Jack to be killed. Her fear of Derek and her desire for freedom had clouded her judgment, leading her down a dark and tragic path. With both Derek and Layla in custody, the case against them was solid. The legal proceedings moved swiftly, with Derek receiving a life sentence for his role as the mastermind behind the murder. Layla, though complicit, received a lesser sentence due to her cooperation and the evidence of her abusive relationship with Derek. The town of Greenfield, though forever changed by the events, found a renewed sense of unity and resilience. The legacy of Jack Thompson lived on, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of seeking justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves.